And we are live. Welcome to the Whatever Podcast. We're coming to you live from Santa Barbara, California. I am your host, Brian Atlas. I'm joined today by Fox. Fox is the founder and CEO of Next Life Sciences, Inc., a medical technology company that is currently developing Vasalgel, a non-hormonal, long-lasting, and reversible male birth control. In 2019, Fox became one of the recipients of the Forbes 30 Under 30 and has also been serving as a vice chair of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Additionally, he's the founder/CEO of WhiteFox Defense Technologies. It's a defense and security company that provides drone threat mitigation. Fox, thank you for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, so I kind of want to get right into Vasalgel. So the current options for male birth control, you've got abstinence, condoms, vasectomy, pull-out method, liking Nickelback, and playing World of Warcraft Classic. And I speak from firsthand experience here. I was in the Hardcore Rating Guild, multiple level 60s, and very effective form of birth control. So you've got some competition from the MMORPG industry. But jokes aside, like a lot of these methods, they have drawbacks. So with Vasalgel, I'm a bit familiar with it, but what is Vasalgel and how does it work?
Yeah, so I think to start off to your point of like what exists currently, right? So there's certainly a lot of ways you could have abstinence, right? And people preach that. At the end of the day, the reality is that we know that the world that we live in today, half of all pregnancies are unplanned. And it doesn't matter really what country you are in the world, half of all pregnancies are unplanned. And I believe that when we look at this, like that is the final frontier of human rights. Like somewhere in the world you can go and exercise your human right for free speech or privacy and all these things. And yet you can't go anywhere and have effective birth control options that enable the populace to exercise their right to choose when and if to have a child. And I believe that half of all pregnancies are unplanned, very simply because we've ignored half of the entire population, right? And we've assumed that things like, maybe Dungeons and Dragons and, right, and like, if guys don't want to have children, they're not going to have children. Well, again, the fact is 1 in 4 men have experienced an unintended pregnancy. And I say it very intentionally like that because unintentional pregnancies affect both people. And so we need to start thinking about this not as just something that happens to women, but truly something that men are a part of, and it carries incredible social, economic, and health consequences to men, their female partner, and broader society when people can't choose when and if to have a child.
Yeah, no, I mean, men really have no options when it comes to reproductive rights, birth control. So
at all.
Yeah,
and
nothing.
Except, like, let's just go throw condoms at guys. And the fact is, like, condoms
suck.
Right? Yeah. You just said condoms suck. Well, guess what? 57% of Americans agree with you. 57%. Like, tell me. What, like, could you imagine going pitching an investor and being like, great, I have this great idea. 57% of people hate it, but we're going to do it. Like, condoms are really good at one thing and one thing alone, and that's protecting against STDs, right? The actual ability for condoms to protect against pregnancies is relatively low. I'll give you an example. If you take 100 people, put them in a room and say, hey, for this year, just have sex like you normally do, but use condoms. Well, guess what? 15 of those 100 people within a year will have a baby. Like, incredibly high, 15 to 18%, so 18% failure rate and a 15% pregnancy rate. And so it's like to assume that condoms are enough.
And they break and
people, and then on top of that, people just simply don't use them. And so it's like, let's have condoms be used. If you want to use condoms, great. I encourage people to use condoms, right? But at the end of the day, people simply aren't choosing that. And then you say, okay, well, we still have vasectomies. Well, vasectomies are not designed to be reversible, right? So that's a permanent sterilization, which is amazing and great. And I'm so glad it exists. At the same time, that is not truly effective birth control. You can't just tell men, everybody, hey, go have a vasectomy.
Yeah, because, some people, maybe they're 18, 19, 20, they don't want to have kids yet, but down the road they will want to have kids. So vasectomy really isn't, maybe if you've already had kids, great, but.
Yes, for people who are child complete, right? It's a great solution. And 500,000 men in the United States each year choose to get a vasectomy. And that's great. And now that we look in the world post-Roe, right, with what happened with Dobbs, we've seen a 3x increase in the amount of men who are going and getting a vasectomy. And many of these men are saying, yeah, you know what, I don't want kids now, I might want them later, and I really hope I can reverse it. Well, the reality is getting a vasectomy reversed is no easy charge. And like and when I look on like Twitter and there's all these people out there like, oh, men need to step up and get birth control and vasectomies are out there and they're reversible. No, you can go get a vasectomy, sure, but it's a $10,000 out-of-pocket procedure to get it reversed. That's a 3-hour-long microsurgery that has a coin flip, 50-50 odds of working. That is not birth control. Throwing condoms at men is not birth control. And the people who say that that's enough are, frankly, I worry about them.
Wow. I didn't know that it was, because, they often say that vasectomy, it's reversible, but it's kind of, like you said, it's a coin flip.
It's a coin flip. And now,
is it even less than 50% for reversibility, or?
Yeah, so it's a literal coin flip. If you look overall, it's about 50%. But the reason that exists is you have to look at the amount of years since the vasectomy. But and so it goes down substantially over the years. But what's really interesting is that vasectomies aren't designed to be reversible. The number one problem with vasectomies is them failing, right? Is a guy going to get the procedure and then it fails. So, like urologists and family care practitioners who do vasectomies, they go hard, right? They do not want it to be reversed. They go in and instead of just snipping, right? A lot of people think they snip. A lot of doctors will go in and take out a section of your vas deferens because they don't want it, because our bodies are amazing, right? They are good at healing themselves. The body's like, whoa, this tube used to be connected. Let's reconnect it.
Yeah, I've heard that even after vasectomy, it can, like you said, the body heals itself. It can get reconnected.
Yeah.
And then someone thought they were good and then get their girl pregnant or, whatever it is. So
for sure. And that's why when people talk about it's reversible, it's like, yeah, theoretically, you could do a lot of things with the body, but most vasectomies are very, very difficult, if not impossible, to reverse. And even when you reverse it, you go through the whole procedure, you can't actually impregnate somebody. And so this shows like there's this massive need, right? When we think about what do men want, right? And this goes to Vasalgel, right? Your question, like, what do men want? Well, men want something that is, and we've seen this time and time again in polls. I'll back up and I'll start with what I think men generally don't want, right? Which is like when we think about what like the typical approach and the most common criticism I hear, and I ask everybody who's listening in to ask themselves, and it's this question of like, well, will women trust men to take male birth control? And I love that question because people are like, oh no, I wouldn't trust a man to take male birth control, because they think of male birth control as a pill, right? As the pill that you take every day. And women themselves know that, when you actually look at how often they take it at the wrong time, right? They forget to take it a day. They go on vacation and forget it, and they start taking it again, but they don't realize that there's this huge tail, right, that exists to have it actually be effective again, right? Women are smart enough to know, like, I wouldn't trust a man to take a pill every day and all that. I wouldn't trust myself to take a pill every day. And so when you look at, like, will women trust men? They say a lot of times, no. But if you frame the question, would you trust a man if he says he has male birth control, if it's a set it and forget it, something that's long lasting? Overwhelmingly, over 80% of women in committed relationships say yes, obviously, right? Because especially that means they don't have to be on birth control.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah. So kind of going back to it. So just for people that don't know, what is Vasalgel?
So Vasalgel is a quick, simple 10-minute pain-free procedure. You go in, quick 10-minute pain-free. You come out and you have 10 years of thought-free protection. And here's the best part. You can reverse it on demand at any time. 10 days, 10 months, 10 years later, I don't care. When you're ready to have a child, then you go and you can have a child. And then you say, oh, but what happens if, like, at 10 years, what happens? Well, at 10 years, you get it reversed or you get it renewed, right? I mean, when people talk about, like, subscriptions, that's the best subscription. Every 10 years, you have to go do something. That doesn't get better than that.
Okay, nice. And so can you go kind of describe what the actual mechanism is? What is the procedure?
For sure. So in our bodies as men, we have a little tube called the vas deferens. There's two of them, in fact, one on each side. And in the vas deferens, it's the little tubes. The sperm travel through it and go swimming. You think of it like they're swimming down, a river. And what a vasectomy does is they go and they actually snip the vas deferens. And often then we'll take out a chunk, like a whole section, or clip it or burn it, right? And many men are like, whoa, then I see smoke coming up between my legs when they get a vasectomy. It's quite a thrilling experience, right? So with us, what we do, the key difference is that with the vas deferens, instead of snipping it or taking out a chunk or searing it, what we do is we inject our hydrogel, a medical grade proprietary hydrogel it's called hydrogel because it's made up of mostly water. And it creates this little flexible filter in there. And that little flexible filter is biocompatible. Your body just sees it, and since it's mostly water, just like your body, it's comfortable with it being there. And you can't even see it, feel it from the outside, but it's this little flexible filter in this little tube that's about the size. The tube itself is a little smaller than like a thin spaghetti noodle, right? And so you have it filled with this hydrogel. And this hydrogel, the best thing is that it allows seminal fluid to be able to pass through it. This is key because one of the biggest causes of discomfort after a vasectomy is believed to be from back pressure. So imagine like damming off an entire river, right? That creates a lot of back pressure. Whereas with our method, it's like putting a net across the river. And all those little swimmers now can't pass through. And then people are, well, what happens to the fishies, right? Like those fishies were trying to swim through, they couldn't swim through. Well, just like what would happen if you put up a net, right? The fishies don't go through. The fishies live out their little life cycle upstream and then just get reabsorbed back in the body the exact same way, Brian, if you decide to not have sex or not to masturbate for 24 hours, right? I don't know if you've ever done that.
It's a long time.
I know it's a long time.
Long time.
But if you go a certain period, your body's like, oh, let's just like recycle this and make some more sperm. So we have fresh sperm all the time.
Right. Wait, so, and you were saying that with the vasectomies, there's a back pressure. And is that so, and it can cause pain, right? So is that can it also just be due to, because I've heard there's a chronic pain risk with the vasectomies. Can that potentially be due to the actual incision, like the cut, the damage there, or is that has to do with like you said, the back pressure?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there's two types of vasectomy, or two broad categories of vasectomy: the traditional vasectomy, and then what's known as NSV, the no scalpel vasectomy.
Right.
Most doctors do the no scalpel vasectomy. The actual procedure of that initial, so with a traditional vasectomy, you slice. You slice a little bit, and that exposes the vas deferens. With a no scalpel vasectomy, it's a little puncture. And so that is not usually any cause of discomfort. Now, with traditional scalpel vasectomy, some men report, or I'll say there's a higher prevalence of people reporting discomfort afterwards, but only for 3 months. So of any type of vasectomy, when you're talking about the actual discomfort in the scrotum, it goes down to less than 1%, regardless of vasectomy method. Okay. So that's not really what causes it, and that's why there's people. That's where the belief is generally that it's usually related to the backflow.
Okay, got it. Interesting. And so,
I want to be clear.
Sure.
I'm a big fan of vasectomies. Okay. If somebody's done having children, go get a vasectomy for God's sake.
Right.
Right. And they have very low incidences of issues, especially if you go to somebody who's experienced with them. So like, I want to be really clear, like vasectomies are great. And at the same time, we are improving upon the vasectomy and not just making a vasectomy 2.0, right? This is expanding to your point, like an 18-year-old, right? 18-year-old, like we're here in beautiful Santa Barbara, right? You go out, some kids going off to college, they say, hey, I don't want a kid right now, right? Like I am myself a kid. I was like a kid like 3 days ago. Now all of a sudden I'm, going to college, right? I don't want a kid right now. I probably want one in the future or maybe not, but right now I don't even know if I want one. That is where Vasalgel is so incredibly powerful.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely bridged the gap between like we discussed. If you've had kids, I think vasectomy is a fair option. But we're here at UCSB, which I think recently was actually rated #1 party school, and a lot of hookups going on. I know you went to Cal Poly SLO, which was 2 hours north or so.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I don't know if there's a big party scene there, but lots of hooking up, and I think a lot of UCSB frat guys or just UCSB students in general would be pretty keen to get something like this.
For sure. So you mentioned like frat guys. What's really interesting is the number one largest group that we see showing interest, you might think would be like frat guys who want to go and just bang a bunch of women, right? It's actually not.
Or just people in relationships.
Yeah, it's people in relationships who are in committed relationships that are young professionals that are saying like, hey, like I'm a man. I don't want to like just burden my partner with taking birth control that has a lot of side effects, right? Or isn't, over 20% of women report significant side effects with their birth control.
Yeah.
And they have to go through the hundreds of different birth control options, right? To try to find the one that's the least amount of side effects. That's literally the process, right? And so when you think about that and you're like, wait, as a man, I could take that burden off and not just shift the burden off of my partner, but remove the burden of birth control from our relationship by getting a quick 10-minute pain-free procedure to allow both of us to pursue our careers and our dreams and then make an active choice to have a child.
You mentioned pain-free. Is it, because there is an injection, right, into the vas deferens. Is there an incision that's made too? Is there a numbing that goes on so that it is pain-free? Because I imagine anytime you cut into the skin, there's going to be some pain, right?
For sure. So if you ask yourself, like, last time you got an immunization, right? It's like, yeah, that's discomfort. It's like, ouch. But like in the grand scheme of life, would you call it like painful?
It's pretty minor.
Pretty minor.
Like a shot. Yeah.
Exactly. Now imagine going and getting an injection, right? But instead of that, they give you a nice little blast of local anesthetic ahead of time. And then they do the injection.
Like some Novocaine or something.
Exactly. So it's a nice little blast of, similar like Novocaine.
Something like it,
right? It's a nice little blast of that. And then a secondary injection of a secondary anesthetic, local anesthetic. Okay. So then you can't feel anything. You don't even feel even the injection.
Okay.
So, it doesn't get more, it doesn't get better than that.
Just curious, if there was no anesthetic, would it be quite painful to receive the injection into the vas deferens? Not that would ever be done, but I'm just curious.
It would. I don't think it would be anywhere near as discomforting as you would expect.
Sure.
Because you're not going through nerves. You're not going through any muscle. Like it's literally, it's like a little spaghetti noodle underneath a very thin layer of skin.
Got it. Yeah. And so you said, so it's a one-time injection, lasts 10 years.
Yep.
Or that's what's anticipated to
last,
right?
Yeah. All of this, I have to give me the disclaimer. It's
in the works.
Yes.
It's in the works.
It's in the works, right? So.
Yeah. And so how is the procedure reversed? Let's say someone gets it, then 2 or 3 years down the line, they say, hey, I want to have kids, or I just don't want it anymore. How's it reversed?
So as easy as the initial procedure, another quick 10-minute pain-free procedure. You go in, and the only difference is what's getting injected is not the hydrogel, so that little flexible filter. Instead, it's just simple dissolution. And so that gets injected and it dissolves. So I'll get a little kind of breakdown of how the magic of hydrogel.
Yes.
So when it's injected, when it's in the syringe, before it's injected, it is a liquid. Then once you inject it into the vas, it then forms into that nice semi-permeable solid. That then can be simply reversed by another quick, simple injection that turns it back into a liquid. So then it turns back into a liquid and then gets flushed out.
Okay.
And you just clear your pipes however you want to. I won't ask.
And so the next time that you urinated, it would just flush out, or?
So because So the way that kind of just from anatomy, right? You have the vas deferens, which carries the sperm, and then eventually that makes its way into the urethra.
Oh, okay.
The urethra then allows the sperm to go into the big magical world.
Got it. Okay.
So there's other methods to flush that out that aren't urination.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So how many people are currently working on Vasalgel?
Yeah. So we have, so just going back into the history of Vasalgel, it's been in development since 1979.
Right, in India, right?
In India, exactly, known as RISUG. And then a nonprofit known as Parsmas Foundation said, wow, they've done so much over in India showing that this is, that it's safe, that it's effective. They've been implanting it in hundreds of men, showing that it works for up to 13, 15 years, showing that it works. And so what they did is they said, look, in order for this to reach the full massive potential to truly change what it means to be human, in order to do that, we have to determine how do we do this at scale. And so they brought it over to the United States, named it Vasalgel, and have been working to solve how do we manufacture this at scale? How do we do quality control across batches? What are the key variables here that make it work in some cases and maybe not work in others? So they tested all the limits. And they published those results. Hey, when this variable is here, it doesn't work, right? It doesn't set. Or when it's up here, it doesn't work. But when you have this nice Goldilocks zone, it works perfect. And so they did the analytics on the actual hydrogel. From there, that's where Next Life Sciences came in, which is, okay, now that they've proven it's safe and it's effective, right? Now that we've shown that across these different animal studies, we've been working with them over the last bit, and then now have completely transferred it over to Next Life Sciences, where our focus is, now let's commercialize this. Let's actually enable people to be able to get this here in the United States and around the world, more than just as a research project, which is what's happened in India. So when we think about like this general approach, it's been used in hundreds of different animal models and in hundreds of humans. Now, Vasalgel itself specifically, we as this perfected, right, with all of the right Goldilocks zones of all the variables all tweaked perfectly, that is what we currently have today, and we're doing a large preclinical study that we're kicking off at the start of this coming year in 2023. And that is the final one that says, look, when you take all of these variables and put them all together, now we can show in a statistically significant model, right, with enough different animals, that this is an effective contraceptive and that it can be reversed very easily.
Gotcha. And so Next Life Sciences, that's your company, your CEO, founder. How many people are, because obviously you probably have people in the admin and stuff, and maybe marketing, web development, but how many people do you have actually researching, scientists or whatever?
So we have about, when you look across like the doctors, the medical team, the experts, the expert advisors working on each thing, have probably around, I'd say, a dozen PhDs.
Oh, wow.
Or PhD or MDs.
Okay, got it. And so what's the funding looking like? Because I can't imagine it's cheap to fund medical research. Yeah. And like you said a dozen PhDs, so that's probably a decent price tag. So are you funding it? Do you have investors? What's that look like, if you can speak on that for a bit?
Yeah, for sure. It's really one of the exciting things about this is that investors have so much wanted to participate in bringing Vasalgel to the world. And we've had a lot of incredible donors, over $4.5 million donated from the public or through grants to help prove and de-risk the technology. And now we're raising funds from investors. We already have had some really incredible investors step up to help bring it to market. What's really exciting from an investor standpoint is that it is something that is it's highly de-risked, right? We know it's safe, we know it's simple and effective, and we know that people want it. Right? It's just taking it through those steps through the FDA, which is very expensive. Like the regulatory process is very expensive. And at the same time, what makes it so exciting is it's a medical device. It's not a pharmaceutical.
Okay.
And so like a pharmaceutical, like the rule of thumb is it takes at least 10 years and $1 billion. That's a B, billion. It's a little pricey. And so a pharmaceutical is something that is, the FDA considers it something that chemically interacts with the body. And so that's like pills is the classic example, right?
Right.
And so when you have a pharmaceutical product, the FDA is like, wow, there's a lot of things that can go wrong here and a lot of unintended, unexpected consequences. We need to do these massive studies across a lot of different populations, all these different things. The beauty of Vasalgel is it's a medical device, meaning it mechanically interacts with the body. Similar to a hip replacement or a blood cuff monitor or a Band-Aid even. Right? These are all considered medical devices. And so it's a lot more straightforward to say, look, if I put this little filter here, let's look at what happens upstream and let's look what happens downstream. And also, when we talk about effectiveness, the best thing is we don't have to go release a bunch of men into the world and say, call us if you get anybody pregnant. All we have to do is a quick sample afterwards because we remove all sperm, 100% of sperm, right? Not a medical claim, but,
right.
hashtag not a medical claim. But the way that it works is it filters out all of the sperm. So all you have to do is say, well, was there any sperm in the sample? No, you're good to go. Right? And there's very cost-effective litmus test papers that you can buy very, very affordably to do a test at home to say, hey, is there any sperm? Or just look under a microscope. Are there any swimmers in there? No fish? You're good to go. Right? So it's a lot less nuanced than, a pill that you take, which, and I'm really excited about these different pill methods because Vasalgel is not for everybody, right? It's, I believe, going to be the most impactful and for the vast majority of people relevant. But it's not for everybody.
Sure.
Some men will want to take a pill. Some men will want to do other types of procedures. Some men will, the goal is to create a marketplace, to create a true industry here that doesn't exist because condoms and vasectomies is not it's like that's like the Stone Age of male birth control. Like we have a bright and beautiful future ahead of us.
No, it sounds like super exciting, and I'm personally excited. I'll get into that a bit later on, but you had mentioned that RISUG, it was developed in India. You said 1979, was it? Yeah, so it's in development in India. So what is the difference between RISUG and Vasalgel? Is it just the formulation of is there a difference in the formulation or?
Yeah, I think the best way to put it is that it's a lot more control over the variables. So our development process and manufacturing process is much more simplified, which allows a lot more quality control checks along the way. And then we also have a lot more control over the specific variables. And so the beauty of this is that we can take all of the learnings from RISUG and see what worked for it, right? And it's effectively, like at the end of the day, when you put it in, it's very similar. But the key difference is the manufacturing process, the exact variables that we know make it a lot more effective, right, than some of the methods that have been used previously.
Okay.
So we can glean from all of those learnings, right? Is the beautiful thing.
Got it. Yeah. Because I think I read online that the Parsimus Foundation, which was the group initially sort of working on this, they had got the rights or bought the intellectual property rights from RISUG, who I don't know the specific company that was developing it in India, but they bought the rights for that. And but I do want to go to, you mentioned it's a medical device, and if it was a pharmaceutical, like a pill that you take, it's much more expensive to go through the FDA process. You said $1 billion.
Yep.
That's
the average rule of thumb. Yeah.
That's pretty wild. So I mean, that pretty much, I know that Vasalgel is a medical device, but just speaking about pharmaceuticals, I mean, that kind of limits the amount of people that can develop this sort of thing. I mean, that's incredibly, so basically the major big pharma major pharmaceutical companies.
There's a reason they're called big.
Yeah. Yeah. And you said 10 years. So that's a really long time. So because though that this is a medical device, how does the timeline for Vasalgel differ from the 10 years and also the $1 billion price tag?
Yeah. So when we look at the timeline, there's been a lot of work. Obviously, it's been a lot longer than 10 years to develop it. But that's largely because the initial work was largely done just saying like, hey, does this even work? Right? Let's make sure this works. So those were donations, grants, right? And slowly stepping it forward. And so as we stand today, looking forward, we're not looking at 10-year time frame. We're talking about this preclinical trial starting this coming year, then kicking off clinical trials at the end of this coming year. 2023 is what we're aiming for, the end of 2023. That will be those clinical trials where we'll be able to say, hey, to all the 50,000 people who've signed up and said, hey, I'm interested in this procedure, right, and in Vasalgel and what it can do for the world, here's an option for you to be able to have it done, right, and to show that it's safe, it's simple, and it's effective. We've done studies in baboons and rhesus monkeys showing that it is, again, safe, simple, and effective. And now and we know all of the learnings from RISUG that has been used in men. So this is very like natural next step. From there, we're going to do that study for about a year, and we plan to be fully in market by around 2025.
Wow.
So right around the corner.
Okay. And so you're saying human trials in 2023?
That's the goal, end of 2023.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And there's so much demand. Like we literally get messages daily of like, hey, can I sign up? And people asking, where can I fly to get this done? Right? Like, where can I go to get this done? Mm-hmm. Like men are literally willing to they're like, can we go to India? Can we go down to like Costa Rica? Like, what is it going to take?
Got it.
Because people are so eager to participate. And they, again, like we talked at the beginning, there are no options.
Men want options.
Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of people, so I heard about RISUG I was probably 2007, I think. And then I heard about Vasalgel that was being developed, I think, very early on, 2010. And so I think a lot of men have been patiently waiting for something like this because, like you said, men don't have really any options when it comes to male contraception, birth control. And I think really it's going to give men a bit of power in terms of having some control over their reproduction. So first off, I think it's fantastic that you're working on this and that it's being worked on. So really stoked on that. Can you just break down, so I know you said it's not a pharmaceutical medical device. What are as far as getting approval, you still need FDA approval though, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So what are the specific phases that you guys need to go through? Which ones have you already completed?
Yes. So when you look at the phases, the typical approach is you have the in the lab testing, benchtop testing, right? From there, and I'll explain this in very basic terms, but hopefully it's enlightening. So you start off with in lab benchtop testing, using benchtop models, right, that simulate the body. From there, you go to preclinical trials that are typically done with animals. And just as like when we talk about animal trials, like I don't think there's any more fun of an animal trial to be in. Like the baboon trial, it's literally like, hey, let's have this baboon do a 2-minute pain-free procedure, or 10-minute pain-free procedure, and then release it with a bunch of female baboons for 2 years. And the only downside is they had to watch, have some people with lab coats watching them, have sex, but not a bad trial to be part of.
Sure.
And so from there, you show that it's safe, or the key things is you show one, it's safe, and then you show that's effective. That's what we've done with using these different slight variations of the formulation method. Now this next phase is saying, let's take all of these different variables that have been tested independently, bring them all together, show that together they all work. There's very low risk there but you can always have surprises, but we'll adjust accordingly. From there, showing in the animal model, you then go to the clinical model, which you get approval from the FDA to do. if you do it in the United States. You say, hey, FDA, here's our plan. Here are the worst case scenario. And the beauty of it is the worst case scenario is like, it's not reversible. So therefore somebody, who was ultimately, or I should put, if the procedure totally fails, we tell the FDA, hey, it's not the end of the world, especially if you're doing this with men who would otherwise be getting a vasectomy. But we already have all this animal, the preclinical model showing it's safe and it's simple and it's effective. So it's a relatively low risk, and so that means you don't have to show it on as many patients. You don't have to go through all these different showing all these variabilities, because there's not, the vas deferens. While there's some variation between men, right, you can capture that with the statistical models. And from there, that's then when you submit to the FDA and say, hey, you've already approved similar methods of devices before. And effectively, this is very similar to a vasectomy. The only difference is that instead of snipping, there's a quick injection. And, oh, by the way, that injection can be reversed.
And so you're saying human trials sometime in 2023. So, and assuming all goes according to plan, you said you're anticipating 2025 for it to be widely available to the public. And so, actually, you know what? I'm going to come back to that. But so, okay. Are there any known side effects?
We have not seen any major or had any major reported side effects. Yeah, it's been safe. The number one cause of like post vasectomy pain syndrome, which it's called that because it kind of is this umbrella term, is primarily caused from the backflow pressure, but it's also during the actual procedure itself. During vasectomy, there's quite a bit of manipulation of the vas deferens. And so that can cause people to have like this little like discomfort in the moment, especially because it can tug on nerves. So people are like, ooh, that's uncomfortable. We minimize all of that. And so all of the areas that you expect to have discomfort either during the procedure or after the procedure, we eliminate.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I guess since you guys haven't started the human trials yet, it's maybe a bit soon to know. For sure. But what we can say for sure is that we've eliminated all of the vectors that would typically cause side effects or concerns, and we've also can leverage the safety data that's been created through RISUG.
Right. So we can leverage that to say, look, our procedure is faster and simpler. And the formulation, we have a lot more control over the variation, or over the formulation. So we can say that what they've shown to be safe and effective, we can leverage that, and with a lot of confidence, to say that we believe we're set up to have something that is, has really no notable side effects.
And did you receive any information from what they were doing in India? Did they report, if because I mean that's a different product that they're working on, but have you had a chance to review their information, and were there any reported side effects for their formulation, or I don't know if you can speak on that? But
I can't speak specifically for RISUG, but what I can say is that the biggest variability is proper, just like with anything, right? Is a proper procedure. And so what we can say is that if the procedure's done properly and after verification that it's done, and you have no sperm, then you should be good.
Got it. Yeah. And I think you are kind of already touched on this before, but so I know that vasectomy has something like on the high end of some of these reports. I think in Canada they did a research study on this, something like, and this is the top end. I know you mentioned like 1% past 3 months, but
good memory.
Yeah, something like a 14% risk of chronic pain from vasectomy. So, and from what you said, it doesn't sound like it's a concern, but since human trials haven't been conducted yet, are there any concerns or indicators that Vasalgel may pose a similar risk of chronic pain?
So when we look at the reasons for that, the backflow. Yeah, the backflow. Right. Yeah. We feel very comfortable to say that we've eliminated as much risk as humanly possible. Right? You can't ever eliminate all risk, but what I can say is that when you think about like One of our scientists, they were working on this incredible biologic injectable. That was one of their last products that they were developing, and it's a biologic, right? It's working with your DNA, right? So this incredible technology, and they're like, this, when you compare like Vasalgel to really any other medical procedure that you can think of, it's pretty straightforward, right? Like, this is not rocket science, right? It's creating a little filter, right? And this is already done in this exact same method is being used in heart stents, right? Where like people are putting their entire lives on the line that if this fails and this filter doesn't block out the clot, you die. Okay. Right. And like people are putting their lives on the line because this is proven, as much as you can prove it, safe and effective. So we feel very comfortable with that. And at the same time, we're doing the rigorous studies to verify and to find all possible edge cases to ensure that when it comes to market, that we can be fully confident that anybody's going to get the procedure, that it will be, again, safe, simple, and effective.
Got it. And so given it's a synthetic polymer, right? The hydrogel. I mean, I know you said it's mostly water, but there's some synthetic stuff. So it's injected into the vas deferens. Is there a possibility that the material could be allergic to some men, or are there any concerns about toxicity?
It's a great question. So the formulation that we've derived is very biocompatible, and it's used in other products, other medical device products. So because of that, we can have a lot of confidence that it's like the vas deferens isn't any more risk of any issues than a heart stent, right, or other places that this type of hydrogel is used.
Got it.
Yeah, and so it's known, and put in other ways, it's known to be biocompatible.
Okay, so no concerns about potential toxicity. It sounded like from what you previously said that that's kind of already been addressed just by looking at what the actual polymer is, and it's probably been used in other applications. And got it.
Yeah, I think the only where people can draw something is like we've done a lot of studies showing all different types of the formulation. So showing like what happens if this was like lower viscosity, right, or higher viscosity, like what happens. And so when you look at what happens when you have that, you can have things like it'll flow through the vas deferens into other areas, which is obviously not something you want. Right. And so that's why you do those studies to show what are the edge cases so that you know what the tolerances are. And so, theoretically, if we did, and that's what I think those studies help to show. And I think that's maybe where, people are like, oh, like, in this case, like if you have it flow down, it's like, yeah, but that's why we do the study.
Yeah. On that note, is there a possibility of the polymer being flushed out naturally or by chance, or is it once it's there, it's
a very stable hydrogel that binds to the inside of the lumen. So the really convenient part of the lumen is it's not like a tube, right? It's not like a straw. It has a lot of folds inside the lumen, which is the inner side, the kind of the inner hollow part of the vas deferens. And so when you can think about it as it has folds along the wall, but it also when it doesn't have pressure, it's collapsed. So similar to like you think of it like kind of like a star, right? So it like collapses down. And then when you ejaculate, that's when it has pressure and it expands. And so because of that, you have a three-dimensional matrices of adhesion points, which enables you to have a really strong bond to the wall, while also that you have that strong bond at the same time. It's thick enough that it's thick enough in the actual vas that it's very stable. On top of that, it's biocompatible, meaning your body's not going to react to it, but your body doesn't have anything that's going to naturally break it down, which is key. Now, we say 10 years because the studies that have been done show that safe and effective for upwards of 13 to 15 years. And so we say, hey, at 10 years, get it reversed or get it renewed.
So it could potentially be last longer than 10 years.
Absolutely, yes.
But just to be, a little wiggle room there, just to be safe. Okay. So is there, it's the polymer, is it something that just kind of coats the vas deferens, but you said the seminal fluid, it can still pass through. So it's not a full on.
It is, yes. It is.
Totally blocks.
Yeah. So, so like a filter. And so it's a semi-permeable filter.
Oh, okay.
You could think of it a lot like, one of the hydrogels that we interact a lot with in life is Jell-O. And so we'll experiment with this analogy. You have to tell me if it's a good one.
Sure.
But like Jell-O, you can imagine like liquid when it's pressurized passing through Jell-O, right? Well, at the same time, it's you have a matrices there that's filtering out larger elements.
Okay, got it. So is there any risk that that with the Vasalgel, it could potentially result in sperm still being present, or in your animal studies, it's just zero?
Yeah, it completely eliminates because it's a filter.
Okay.
Yeah, so it binds to the walls and creates what's known as a vasocclusion. This is one of the key differences between Vasalgel and RISUG, in that RISUG, their goal was to line the walls of the vas deferens.
Right.
Again, the vas deferens, when it isn't pressurized, it's collapsed. Like there's no hole inside. There's no tube. And so what they ended up doing was effectively most of the time creating a vasocclusive.
Got it. And so, because I remember reading, I think, and this was for RISUG, there's some sort of also like I don't know if it was like an electromagnetic.
Yeah, polarity.
Polarity, yeah.
So that was the theory behind RISUG to begin with, was, okay, if you coat the walls, of the vas deferens, assuming that it is a tube, which again it's not, but if you assume that, you coat the walls of it, because there is a polarity difference between sperm and RISUG, it will essentially pull the sperm to the sides of the wall and kind of destroy them, or like there's all these like crazy animations. The reality is that's not actually what RISUG did in practice. When it was done properly, it was just a vasocclusive. And that's where those discoveries came from. And that's what Vasalgel, when it was brought to the United States, really proved in the animal models, is that the vas deferens, it's much better and much more effective, much safer, and also ensures that it's a medical device. Like, we're not trying to destroy sperm. Like, we're just creating a simple little, filter that filters out the sperm, allows the seminal fluids to pass.
Basically just a blocker.
Yes.
That to me is just a very simple way of understanding what Vasalgel is. So I know that you're not in human trials yet, so maybe this question, there's not really a way to know this yet, but with other forms of birth control, whether it's a pill or IUD or condoms, they have an effective rate, and some of them, even in IUD, there's chance of failure, condoms, chance of failure, female hormonal birth control, chance of failure. Is the anticipated effective rate of Vasalgel, you think it's going to be 100% effective, or do you think there's like 99.9%? What do you think?
Yeah, it's a great question. So when we look at female contraceptives, right, the way they work is it's like, hey, let's just like shift the chemistry of the body and then see what happens. And it turns out with this portion of women that when you shift it this way and you pump them full of this type of hormone at these levels and you make them take it every day and they don't take antibiotics and everything, and the moon lines up, it's effective. And so the process of Vasalgel is much more straightforward. And so we expect to have a near 100% effectiveness after verification of proper injection.
So once someone's had the injection, there will be, before you recommend go have unprotected sex with your partner, do a sperm test before, right?
Precisely. Do the sperm test, verify that's effective. Once it's effective, it should be near 100%. Now, at the same time, we're not advocating people to have unprotected sex. Now, I'm glad you pointed to
Yeah.
the partner, right?
Sure.
So if you're in a committed relationship, great. Go have, and you're not worried about STDs, and you don't need to worry about that, great. Go do that, right? But if you're out, running the streets of Santa Barbara,
Yep.
right? Use a condom. Condoms are great. They protect against STDs with pretty high, high success.
If you were so inclined in the right situation with the partner.
Yeah.
So I want to ask, and I mentioned this before, I've heard about RISUG since about 2007, heard about Vasalgel since 2010. And I realized that you came in pretty recently. I think, a couple months ago, you took over.
Yeah, we've been working with
Vasalgel
them for a while.
But
we've fully taken on the project because it's reached a point of, like, with Parsons Foundation, their goal was, let's de-risk this. Let's prove two things. One, it's safe and effective, and two, men want this. And they did that very successfully. And so then their goal was, okay, let's take this and put it in the hands of somebody who not only can create an actual product out of this technology, but also create an entire industry. Because an industry doesn't exist, right? The communication and the reason that everybody's tuning in is because male birth control blows our mind, but it shouldn't. And when you fast forward and you think about the world that we're creating, like together on this call, right, on this podcast, what we're doing, and everybody who's tuning in, by all of us being here, we're creating a world where future generations will look back and be like, they were excited about male birth control? Like, were they cavemen? Like, how are they excited about male birth control? Everybody has male birth control. It's just a thing, right? But like, we are at that cusp where it is so exciting because it is truly revolutionary and truly changes what it means to be human and have autonomy over who we are and whether we decide to procreate. Like, it is massive.
Yeah, well, it's definitely huge because, female birth control, was that in the 1960s that it kind of first came out? And so that's been 60 years plus where there's been an option for women, but nothing for men. So I definitely agree with you. It's pretty exciting times and people want this.
Yes. And when we think about like female birth control, like you brought it up, like female birth control, I believe, is the largest biologic experiment in human history. It is literally, since the very beginning, let's pump women full of hormones with different concoctions and different levels and just see what happens. And it turns out, hey, it tricks their bodies into thinking they're pregnant, and it also does these other things, and we're just, hey, but it also helps with acne, so, we'll just discount that, right? And it's like, we've just assumed that this is the status quo, but we are in like, the primal age of birth control for all people, right? When we fast forward in the future, I believe that we will have birth control options for men, women, transgender, doesn't matter who you are. You will only have a child when you choose to have a child. Like, the fact that that's revolutionary and groundbreaking is like insane, but it is. And we will continue to press forward, not just with male birth control options, but female birth control options to ensure that everybody has access to safe, simple, and effective options to then make that willful choice. Hey, right now, I have the resources, time, energy, and money, whatever that means for each individual person, to choose to have a child.
Got it. And so just going back, so Vasalgel was previously being developed by the Parsons Foundation. I believe they started in 2010. Yeah. And, they had been releasing reports. They wanted to do human trials. Yeah. They wanted to get it out to market. I don't remember the specific date, but I think at one point they said maybe 2015 or 2017, they said that's when it'll be out. And, so they had it since 2010. It's, they were saying it would have been widely available within the decade back then. Decades come and gone. It seems like delay after delay with the development. I know you weren't involved with really Parsons Foundation back then. I know it's fairly recently that you've been working on Vasalgel. Can you speak on what, and I don't know if you know, but can you speak on what happened there? Why was it delayed with the Parsons Foundation?
Yeah, it's a great question. The reality is that this is something that we see there's a lot of social, I think, awareness that's been growing, which has helped to fuel more resources into the space. And so I think that when we look, for example, since 2005, right? Since 2005, there's been over 500 studies that have been funded on erectile dysfunction in the United States. 500 studies for erectile dysfunction. And yet only 30 studies for male birth control. And so when we think about that, right, like that is a massive differential.
And Viagra came out in the late 90s, right?
Yep.
So, hasn't ED been kind of figured out to a degree?
Exactly. So, and yet people want to tweak it and perfect it, which is great, great, right? But when we think about like, this is a fundamental human right of both men and women that are equally affected by the fact that we don't have male birth control. And so what we've seen now, and I think one of the reasons that things have taken longer is that just good science takes time, right? And we want to ensure that it is 100% safe, simple, and effective. And so there's you need to have enough time to do that, but you also need enough resources. And that's really what's so exciting about where we're at today is I think the general, just the social consciousness. Again, everybody who's tuning into this, showing that there is support and excitement for this much needed technology and truly revolutionary change to what it means to be human. That's where we're at today. And I think what's really interesting when we look at like the Roe v. Wade overturn with Dobbs, what is so exciting about that is that when we look across all political parties, everybody can agree, hey, the more that we can minimize abortions, the need for abortions, the better.
Yeah.
Like everybody supports that. Like, right? And so it's like, hey, let's like set people up for success. And so we're at a really exciting time. Like that just in what it means to be human, to say, hey, I want to be able to participate as a man in the family planning process, and as a woman saying like, hey, like my options aren't actually all that effective, right? It's better than nothing, but like, let's not stop there. And so we're at this point where I think, especially with the United Nations, with their family planning initiative, right, where they're aiming to significantly reduce the fact that 50% of all pregnancies are unplanned. Again, we're not just talking about like far off reaches in the world. We're talking about here in the United States. Yeah. It's insane. And so their family planning initiative 2030 is, I think, and many other efforts of other organizations like World Vasectomy Day, which is an incredible organization that's helping to spread awareness like, hey, men can participate if you're done having children or you're not trying to have children, then don't have children. Like that shouldn't be that insane, but it is. And so all of these great organizations, I think, have done a lot of work to help bring us to a place where we are now, which is where we've shown men want this. They want a long-lasting and reversible, on-demand male birth control option.
Yeah, just on the topic of Roe v. Wade and abortion, not to get super into that, but I definitely think that I agree with you. I think both sides of that, the pro-choice and pro-life sides, can probably agree that, hey, how can we minimize unwanted pregnancies? And I think male birth control is certainly a way forward. I hope I don't want to totally derail the conversation. One thing that I thought about for potentially being an end to the whole abortion debate thing, and maybe this is me kind of going into crazy transhumanist, futurist territory, is the development of an artificial womb. I want to only go on that for a little bit.
Yes.
But are you familiar with like the concept of an artificial womb? Like,
yes.
Is that maybe next up for the next life sciences? Maybe. And do you think that the development of an artificial womb could potentially be the end of the fight between the two opposing sides on the abortion issue?
So the artificial womb is a great question, and shout out to the investor who I just talking to last week. I was talking about like how that's going to massively change things. I'm going to tell you, it's not, right? It is truly going to be revolutionary, whether you agree with it or not, right? But until we first enable like somebody to not have a child if they're not trying to have a child, then we really don't have progress. Like the artificial womb will be like this interesting like this interesting side notion until you like say, hey, like, are you trying to have a child right now? So like, you know, as a woman, women go to the doctor and the doctor asks the golden question. Are you trying to have a child in the next year? If they say no, then the doctor asks the next logical question. Well, let's talk about contraceptive options. When was the last time you went to a doctor and they said, hey, are you trying to have a child in the next year?
Never.
When have his doctor said, hey, let's talk about contraceptive options?
Never.
Right? And it's because they don't really exist.
Yep.
And even vasectomies, right? Doctors aren't saying, hey, you seem to have like, you know, you have your 3 kids. You don't, you know, it seems like you've had a long time since you've had kids. Are you thinking about having more kids? Because if not, we can do other stuff.
Yeah, I think that would have to be something that the man would bring up to the doctor. Yeah.
And you know what happens when the man brings it up? More often than not, the doctor's like, well, what happens if you change your mind?
Yeah.
Right? Like, let's talk about this. And they do all this counseling, which is great to ensure that men aren't doing something that they regret.
Just really quick on that note, I've heard from some women, like there's some women that are dead set, even young women, dead set, I know I don't want kids, and they'll go to their doctor and they'll say, hey, I want my tubal ligation. Tubal ligation, I think that's what it's called. I don't know if there's other forms of sterilization. I think there's a few, but and they get pushback from their doctors saying, hey, you're still young, this is permanent. So do women also sort of encounter that too?
Yeah, it's a great point, because when we look at like, there's been some really interesting studies on this. So the fact is, a lot of doctors are men, right? And whether you're a man or a woman doctor, like when somebody says, hey, I want to get my tubes tied, right? And, which is kind of colloquialism for tubal ligation, they're typically overwhelmingly denied the ability. Right? Like as a medical establishment, we are saying, no, like, are you really sure? Well, we don't think you're really sure enough. Like, and it becomes this massive thing where people are having to go to other countries just to get, again, exercise a basic human right, which is to choose if and when you have a child. Like, what does it say about the society we live in where it's difficult for, especially like a woman, to be able to say, hey, I don't want children, especially if they haven't had children, right? To say, hey, I don't want children, I'm not planning to have children, I want to not have children. Or to say, hey, like, I am pregnant and I want to, stop that. Like, it doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're on, let's set people up for success. And part of that is because men don't have options, but also equally women don't have effective options. Now, if we look statistically at a couple who goes to a doctor and they say, hey, us together, we don't want any kids, right? Or we don't want any more kids. The doctor says, well, you have 2 options. The man can get a vasectomy, the woman can get tubal ligation. And a vasectomy is quick, simple, it's an outpatient procedure, right? Or with tubal ligations, you might die. Okay? Statistically, women are much more likely to have to get a tubal ligation than the man getting a vasectomy. It's insane, right? And so we put up all these barriers for women who are independently making decisions, but then when they're in a couple relationship and one of them needs to make a decision, often it falls upon the woman.
I want to ask you about, so you mentioned how women will go see their doctor and the doctor will try to push birth control, hormonal birth control or other form of birth control on them. And do you think that, not to get too conspiratorial here, but it's certainly the case that, and I don't even think it's conspiracy theory. I think it's happens to be the case. Doctors can get kickbacks from pharmaceutical companies, I think, for recommending certain drugs or something. So do you think maybe could be a component of doctors trying to push birth control on women, is that they're getting some sort of kickback from, what are all the people that go, what's the name of the people that go
the reps? The pharmaceutical reps.
Pharmaceutical reps. Thank you. Yeah. Do you think that's maybe a component there?
I think that there's a lot of interesting things that can be explored there. At the same time, while I am a big fan of women who are not trying to have a child being able to exercise their right to not have a child.
Yeah.
Right? Like, go and take birth control. Right? And so I wouldn't necessarily frame it as much as it's being pushed, as much as they're being made aware of their options. And while there's huge financial incentives, right, across the board, there's a lot of work being done to decrease the amount of hormones that are present within birth control. And again, it's then you have to find this Goldilocks zone of like, okay, let's decrease it so it decreases the side effects, but where it still remains effective. It's really difficult. The andrologists out there, they're doing that. It's incredible work. And at the same time, like women are forced to endure traditional forms of birth control, right? Hormonal birth control options. I mean, even IUDs and like having localized hormone, like there's still an effect on the body. And so that is really where I think the key thing is that because there's no other option, like women are forced in that. And you create this circular argument that's really interesting, which is like, well, what we have doesn't really work, but it works good enough. And so women aren't demanding more solutions and male birth control. Because women are quote unquote satisfied. Well, go talk to 10 women on the street, right? You do the dating podcast, ask them if they love their birth control, right? And it's like, I want women to be on birth control. I want men to be on birth control if you're not having a kid, if you don't want to have a kid, right? Like both parties should be participating in that. Let's decrease the amount of side effects and increase the amount of effectiveness. Yeah,
I've definitely, from just girlfriends or just women I've talked to, a lot of them report side effects from the hormonal birth control. I mean, even the IUD, copper IUD, there's a hormonal IUD, definitely can be some pretty bad side effects. So I want to go back. You mentioned that there were only 30 studies that were done on male forms of birth control. You said in the past, what was it?
Since 2005, funded.
Federally
funded. Yeah.
Since 2005. So, I mean, what's with the industry's lack of progress in non-hormonal methods of male birth control, such as Vasalgel? And why do you think funding for male contraception research is so limited? Is so limited.
Yeah, so I think there's a big part of that goes to there's a few components there, but when you think about the ability to have a pill that women take every day, right? That's good money for companies, and it's also something that people are just used to, right? And so disrupting that takes a lot of societal pressure. And there's this notion that, women are, more or less satisfied. But all it takes is literally asking 10 women or looking at any of the research done on this to show women aren't satisfied. Yeah, they like birth control, the birth control options more than not having them, right? But there's this misconception that exists. And so I think that there's that combined with this rather I'll say insulting view of masculinity that says, well, men just won't do it. And it's that's such an oversimplistic approach. That's we have studies showing that just in the United States right now, there are 17 million men actively looking at options for male birth control, actively seeking out contraceptive options for themselves. And there's nothing even that they can solve. Right. And so that's talk about people that are eagerly wanting something. And as we look at, you yourself, right, we're interested in Vasalgel for a reason. And so I think there's this oversimplistic view of what women are satisfied with just because they aren't loudly complaining, which is, I think, just shows real shame around our understanding of what women endure in order to set themselves up and their families up for long-term success, combined with this oversimplistic view of masculinity.
Yeah, I don't think that there's a sexually active man alive on this planet who hasn't at least once had a fear of, did I knock her up? I don't want kids, fear of unwanted pregnancy. So I think a lot of men are probably really looking forward to having some form of birth control. So not to get too conspiracy theorists, but do you think that because pharmaceutical companies, they stand to make more money from women just taking a pill every day, that big pharma, they just refuse to fund male birth control? Because for them, these companies make 50 billion a year, I think.
Yep.
Merck, one of them 40, 50 billion a year. I mean, there's Pfizer, all these other ones. I mean, I assume the funding for something like this, like what? I mean, 10 million to them is a drop in the bucket.
Yep.
So, I mean, do you think that, I mean, you kind of already mentioned it, but do you think there's a component of, hey, we're making all this money with the women just taking pills every day. Why bother? Our focus is on making money. They are in the business of, selling drugs, and they want to make money. So
for sure. So when we think about those organizations, right, those are C corps. They are literally legally required to maximize their financial returns
for the shareholders.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Like that's their legal duty. And so with Next Life Sciences, we're set up as a B Corp, a benefit corporation. And so our goal is, of course, to make fiscally responsible decisions that set up the company for long-term sustainable growth, while at the same time recognizing that our higher purpose is not just to make a bunch of money for shareholders. At the end of the day, we exist to provide, to execute on our mission, which is to empower people to be able to choose when and if to have a child. That is why we exist, and we have that legally built into our founding documents. So we are so that provides us protection to say, look, we are existing for a social benefit. And at the same time, I believe this is a giant market with huge amount of value, and our investors, our current investors and incoming investors will see the value of that. But I think part of it is this is when we think about the male birth control space, right? They're like, there's 500,000 men get a vasectomy each year, right? That's a relatively small amount of people for big pharma, right, to invest in. But we're not trying to be a vasectomy 2.0. We're trying to enable every single man who doesn't want a child right now to not have a child. Like it just blows my brain every time I say it, to be like, how is this how are we still here? Like this is the future that we're creating, where everybody can effectively participate in family planning. That is why we exist, and we have the legal protection to do that and to execute on that mission, which makes me so excited, right? As a CEO, to be able to say, yes, let's design this for long-term sustainable success that is measured not by financial returns, but by the social impact that we create.
Yeah, one of the fears that, just kind of bringing it back to the whole pharmaceutical company thing, one of the fears I had with, it started to creep up with the Parsons Foundation, because, they made these promises, and then they, not promises, but they, said, it'll be out in 2015, 2017. My worry was that Parsons Foundation was like a planned obsolescence, almost like Pfizer, GSK came in, said, hey, we'll set up this other foundation here. We'll buy the rights to the IP, the intellectual property, and just not develop it. That way we can continue making money from female birth control, or from female birth control. I don't think that's what was going on, but to me, it almost like, I think like, if Vasalgel comes to market, I mean, do you feel that there's maybe a target on your back? Because if Vasalgel comes to market, I suspect it will take money away from these big pharmaceutical companies, maybe, and they're going to lose revenue from handing out pills to women to take every day. So I was always wondering, couldn't they just come in, buy up the rights for $5-10 million? Like I said, that's a drop in the bucket for them, and just never develop it. I mean, I don't know if you've heard anything about that, if that's ever been done. And, there's a promising new thing, but it's going to come at the loss of income for these companies. Hey, we'll buy the IP rights and then just quietly just never develop it. That's not you, right? That's not Next Life coming in.
No, you can see the bags under my eyes that show that we're working every single day, right? Day and night, to truly bring it to the world in an effective way. And I think it's one of the big things that is that we've seen lacking in the male birth control space is like this isn't just like doing cool science. Right? This is about creating a product that like we're figuring out how do we set up manufacturing, localized manufacturing in different countries, right? So that we can then maximize the value to each individual country to be able to manufacture the product themselves and provide that local, like all these different pieces. That's just one example,
Sure.
right? To say like, how do we actually like build an entire industry here where we can see this, the massive uptake that's going to be needed, right, in both the dense urban cities and most rural areas of the world. Mm-hmm. When we think about Parsmas Foundation, I think like something to highlight. Parsmas Foundation's founder, Elaine Listner, she's known as the mother of male birth control. Like she has been working for decades to solve how do we get male birth control out there, right? How do we solve this? And she's tirelessly done that. And I can tell you that while I can't speak to the specifics of our work together, I can tell you that there was a lot of people who are interested in providing a lot of money to make things disappear. But like I have to really admire her dedication to see this be successful. And that's why we started working together, is because this is my bread and butter, right? This is like what I live for, is to see this be successful. Like very personally, I grew up in the foster care system. Like I saw firsthand what happens when people can't choose when and if to have a child. Mm-hmm. And like since then, I have founded and started and ran other companies very successfully and grew them and built entire new industries. And it's always been this aching in my heart. Like, how do we actually solve the root of so much suffering in the world, so much chaos that comes from when people can't choose? And like, we can do that. We can truly solve what is, I would say, is a systemic plague of our society that just permeates throughout. And everybody turns a blind eye to, and just blames women and says that let's just pump them full of more hormones, and that's going to solve the problem. It's not, and we know it's not, and we have the statistics to prove it, and we have just go out on the street and ask any single person, right? And every single person tuning in has their own story and their own experiences of people they've seen whose lives have been fundamentally changed because they weren't able to choose when and if to have a child, right? And it's about looking at a societal scale. And at the same time, there are amazing people who've come out of accidental pregnancies, right? But it's about enabling people to have that choice.
Got it. What is the market research on Vasalgel or products like this? Are there certain countries or populations that are more open to this method of contraception than others?
We see demand from literally every corner of the world, right? Whether it's someone in a city that says, hey, that is socioeconomically disadvantaged, and they're like, hey, unplanned pregnancies has caused my family for generations to be stagnated. Like, I want to go to college. I want to go get a career. Like, I want to do these things. And for example, as a woman or as a male, and I want responsibility over the children that I'm creating, and I want to have them when I am ready to have them, right? So from those, we have people who literally message us daily sharing stories like that. We also have people sharing stories of, hey, I live in this very rural, far out part of Canada, right? Or in Australia, or wherever they are, where they say, hey, I'm here. As a couple, they say, hey, as a woman, I can get an IUD, or I could take the pill, and the doctor will come into town and prescribe that to me and give it to me and do the implant, which is great. But guess what? What happens at 3 months when they have to go do a checkup? What happens at 1 year when they have to do a checkup? Now they have to travel 6 hours, right, in order to go get that. And that means taking time off of work. That means finding transportation, right? So no matter where you are in the world, you can benefit greatly. Not just that, but then we look at people who are high net worth individuals, right? People who are very wealthy, right? Who are saying, hey, I want to be able to choose when I have a child. There's a famous, I think it was I won't name him, but a famous celebrity type figure, right? who he goes, there was a recent case where he went and he was, having sex with his partner at the time. They weren't in a committed relationship, but he was having sex. He went into the bathroom, took the condom off, put it in the trash can. Do you know about this story?
Oh, Drake?
Well,
Is it with the hot sauce?
Right? Put hot sauce in it. Yeah, because he's like, hey, I want to make sure this sperm doesn't go anywhere.
Yes.
And then she decides to put that inside herself. And then she has a reaction because she just put hot sauce inside herself. Right? So like, it literally doesn't matter.
Sounds like a good time.
Yeah. Right.
All right.
It's like, it literally doesn't matter who you are, where you are in the world.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter how much money you have, how little money you have, how much like hope you have for your future. You need access to solutions that enable you to choose when and if to have a child.
Yeah. It's interesting. You brought up Drake. I think that
Drake.
You're right. It was all me. The NBA, I think in the early 2000s, released a memo to all their players and said, hey, if you have sex with a woman, wear a condom, and you need to flush it down the toilet, because there was some reports of women wanting to hook up with these, NBA players. They're obviously very incredible athletes. They probably make decent money. So there's been some stories of kind of some women trying to, I think it's obviously quite rare, but
extremely rare.
Some women trying to baby trap guys. And so, I mean, that's another market there for Vasalgel.
Yeah, and that's the amazing thing. It like literally doesn't matter who you are. It's one simple question: are you trying to have a child right now?
Yeah.
No, then let's not have a child, right? Like whether you are a basketball player, a football player, right? As a singer, is Drake a singer? Right? Is that what rapper? Okay.
Singer.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So like, no matter who you are, or whether you are in the far off reach of the world and you want to be able to like say, hey, like, I'm married and right now we are focusing on our careers, or right now, we don't have the resources, right? Or, right now we already had 2 kids. Maybe we want a third later, but we don't know. Right. And we don't want to cut off our options. And if we did, we don't want to say like, hey, let's just pump my partner full of hormones. Oh, but wait, we don't have the resources or the time or ability to be able to get them on that. And so now we're using very ineffective birth control options. Literally every single human on earth benefits, not just men and not just women who are using it, right? In a couple. But if you think about like the environmental impact, right? The number one contributor to the global climate crisis, to pollution, right? The number one way we reduce that is we say, look, if you're not trying to have a child, don't have a child. Because Morgan Stanley analysts have found that you can do all these great things. You can get an all-electric car. You can use all, fancy electronic, appliances, excuse me. You can never travel in an airplane. And yet simply having one less child is 7 times more effective at reducing your footprint. And so it's like, well, we don't have to stop people from having babies. All we have to say is, hey, do you want to have a baby? No? Great. Let's not have a baby. Right? And so when you think about like far off, tribes in the Amazon who've never talked to any outside communities, they will benefit from Vasalgel.
Wow. So are you thinking like just super small warrior tribes just in the middle of Africa? Like it's going to be widely available to them too, you think? Or
oh, well, I mentioned them as an example from the environmental impact.
Right. Sure. So I want to ask, how accessible would this be to the adult male population? Like, and what is the anticipated cost of the procedure?
Yeah. So our goal again is we're not trying to make a lot of money here, but we are trying to set it up for long-term sustainable success. And so when we look at price points, it's very similar. You can think of like a vasectomy, right? So it's designed to be accessible. It's designed for any man, no matter what their social economic situation is, to be able to get access to it. And that's not just looking at the cost. Like we have a lot of variables we take into consideration. How close can we get the clinics to the communities who most eagerly seek this and have the least amount of access to transportation, as just one example, right? So it's not just like, how do we reduce the cost, but how do we set them up for success? How do we make this something that somebody could do on their lunch break, right? Similar to like how you go and donate blood, right? How do we bring this to people directly? And so we're working with different organizations that set up things like pop-up clinics, where it's like, hey, for a month, we're going to be here and you're going to be able to get this done, right? Whether it's between if you have 2 jobs, between the jobs, or like before you get home from work, like you go get it done and have it be a very simple, comfortable process. Similar like giving blood, as well as even we're looking at setting up clinics like on college campuses, right? Making it, bring it to where the people are so they can get access to this.
And so do you yet have a sense of, could you put like a price tag on it, a couple $100, less, more? What do you think?
Yeah, well, we're not prepared to release specific numbers on the price.
Okay.
I can tell you that we're designing it to be accessible to everyone, as well as creating programs to subsidize it.
Mm-hmm.
Again, so every single person who wants to be able to control when and if they have a child can do so. And unlike with female birth control, it doesn't require the continued checkups, the continued going and getting it readjusted or verified. Right? These are things that you could do the verification at home, and you get it reversed again the same way, a quick 10-minute pain-free procedure.
Got
when
it.
You're ready.
Okay. So you don't have to tell me the exact price, but do you think it would be commensurate with the cost of a vasectomy, maybe less than the cost of a vasectomy?
It will be similar.
Okay.
Yes.
Got it. And what do you see as the biggest barriers to getting these methods used once Vasalgel is approved? So are you foreseeing men not wanting to use it? Also, is insurance, do you think insurance will cover this, or is this going to probably have to be out of pocket?
Yeah, it's a great question. So going back to something that we talked about earlier that I really want to emphasize is I don't think we're going to substantially reduce the number of women that are using female birth control. Okay. Like, that's not the goal. The goal is to give them a choice. If you're in a relationship, to say like, hey, do we want to use 2 methods of protection, right? Or do we want to, like, there are a lot of couples where the female's on birth control and they still use condoms. And it's like, let's give the man another option that can create enhanced intimacy, in those relationships. So I don't think we're going to substantially reduce, like, our goal at least is not to substantially reduce the amount of female birth control. It's about enabling people to make that choice, whether if they're single or as a partnership. Now, going into what we see as the barriers, maybe it's naive to say, but like, I don't know of any barriers outside of just going through the, rather mundane regulatory process. Like, it's, again, safe, simple, effective. Men are eagerly, to the point of yourself, like, you wanted this so bad that you came up with a conspiracy theory of why it wasn't here, right? And you're not the only person who's said that, who's had that conspiracy, right? Mm-hmm. Like, there are a lot of men who are like, where is this? I want this now, right? Like, we've gotten threats, like, release Vasalgel. And it's like, it's not like it's just sitting in a room, like, just like, haha, it's back here, not out there. And so, like, I think the biggest thing for us will be helping to reframe, like, birth control options. That, like, this isn't just for married men. Like, this is for, hey, if you're 18 years old, and you're going into college, right? Or heck, just like with, with young women who are going into high school. If they're not trying to have a child, let's set them up for success, right? With young women, they often will start birth control options in their teenage years. Why not do the same with men? If they don't want to have a child right now, then let's set them up for success.
Yeah, I definitely think that there's a huge demand from men for something like this. Certainly, I suspect that there's going to be some subset of men that are hesitant or just outright say don't want to get it. Do you have a sense of, and I don't know if you've done studies on this or Parsimus Foundation did any market research on this, of the men that are hesitant or that just outright say, I'll never get it. What are some of the objections that you've heard from men as far as getting Vasalgel?
I think the biggest one,
and maybe there's some misconceptions too about it too, but sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So one, there's a misconception that gets injected into the penis, or into the urethra. That just simply doesn't happen, right? So there's nobody's touching your penis. Calm down. So that's one. But I think one of the concerns that, or when we look at the buckets of men, right? There's 3 buckets. They're the men who say like, I will never get this because I'm a man and somehow this like hurts my masculinity. Right? There's like a bucket of men that say that, and we'll dive into what that, like why. Then there are the men who are like, this is amazing and awesome, but I don't want to be the first, right? And that's by far the largest bucket. And then you have the innovators, the people who are the early adopters who are like, sign me up. Like this is a relatively super low risk way for me to be a part of completely changing what it means to be human. Not to mention I get they are like individually get a massive benefit of not accidentally getting someone pregnant. And so when we look at those 3 buckets, again, the largest are those people who are like, hey, like, I just want to see other people doing it and then like sign me up. Right. And when we look at the bucket of people who are just like, hey, this isn't for me, they are largely like in this whole notion of like, well, 2 buckets. One is their, hey, whatever God's will is or whatever, the universe wants, like, let's just spread my seed and see what, gets planted, what crops come. And so when they look at that, great. Like you're always going to feel that way. There's nothing I'm going to do to change that. Go spread your seed. If that's what, you want to do, you have your own free will. The other bucket of people who are like, hey, women have birth control. I don't see why this is needed. It's like, I can point you at all of the studies, but just go talk to a woman. Like, for God's sake, like talk to a woman and she'll tell you like, yeah, hey, if there were an option, that would be great. If not just to help protect yourself, and add another layer of protection, or to, shift that responsibility to the male partner and alleviate the collective burden, not just shift the burden, but alleviate the burden of birth control. And I think that just a lot of times comes from like telling men, go talk to a woman. Right. And you see a lot of men shift their perspective. So there's been studies showing like, hey, when men are more aware of the side effects of female birth control, they're much more willing to say, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And wait, and I saw a comment in the chat really quick, but so someone's saying that, and I'll get to that later. We'll do some chats towards the end, but so Parsimus Foundation, they were working on Vasalgel. You guys very recently, Next Life Sciences, correct? Very recently took over. Just very briefly, how did that come about? Was it an acquisition? I don't know if you can share how much you can share about that. Was the Parsimus Foundation actively trying to offload Vasalgel? Who approached who? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So Vasalgel, their goal, Parsimus Foundation's goal was, again, to de-risk it by showing it safe, simple, and effective, and men want it. From there, they were then looking for partners to come in to help with the actual productization of it and the industry building side of it. And so I think I want to emphasize, there was no offloading, right? Mm-hmm. This is a revolutionary advancement in humanity. Like when we think about like The Economist, very famous publication, right? In 2000, they said the most significant innovation.
Sorry, guys, we have a motorcycle that just went by. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, he has big cojones.
Yes.
You can tell. It's very loud. Right? And so when we look at The Economist, they said in 2000, they said the most significant advance and innovation of humanity in the entire 20th century was female birth control. And so Parsimus Foundation took that very significantly at saying, Like if we do this right and we bring in the right partners and we de-risk this and we bring in the right partners to truly build an industry here and who has experience building an industry, male birth control will be the same will be said about male birth control, which is that it will be the most significant advance of the 21st century. And it doesn't take a lot of like faith to see that. And so the Parsonage Foundation has been looking for the right partner to bring that to bear. And we got connected. And I think there is an immediate recognition that like this is not about like creating a vasectomy 2.0, right? This isn't about just selling something off, bringing it to the point and selling it off to big pharma.
Right.
Like those are all cop-outs, right? This is about truly changing what it means to be human. And so they saw that combined with my experience working in highly regulated industries, building new industries, creating new laws. Like this is something my last company, when I started my last company, it was illegal to do what I was doing. Like I was told like, this is illegal. And I'm like,
is this the drone thing?
Yeah.
I definitely want to talk a bit about that a bit later.
Okay.
Or unless you wanted to go into it now, if it was contextual.
Yeah, we'll leave the cliffhanger.
Yeah, sure. So I know that, so Vasalgel, it's not yet available for humans, but my understanding is, it's been used in pets as a non-surgical neuter, correct? And was that through the Parsonage Foundation that was doing that, in addition to the, you said it was in rhesus monkeys for the animal trials?
Yeah, so it was part of the preclinical work.
Okay.
Which is part of the preclinical work is, hey, let's try to see what happens when you use a contraceptive, reversible contraceptive with animals. Because right now, the traditional, methods of contraceptive with animals is rather extreme.
Yeah.
Right. And it's, let's just chop off the balls.
Right.
Right. And it's like, hey, what happens if like you don't want your, your male animal breeding? What is typically done, especially in, like if you look at like lions, for example, in zoos, like because of the dynamics and the hormones and how like, male lions have to lead a pride. That's the word I'm looking for, of, female lions and younger lions. Like you can't do that. You can't chop off their testicles. And so what you often have to do is you have to tubally ligate all of the female lions, which can be which can cause a lot of, as we mentioned, side effects.
Wait, why can't you get rid of the lions?
I'm not an expert on this, but it's not to maintain order of a pride, lions need their testicles.
Right. Probably. Yeah. I mean, I imagine it has some sort of major hormonal impact on them. So
yes. Which actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because thank you for bringing that up. That was a nice plan, because that is one of the biggest, like concern, to go back to your earlier question, is like, what does this do for men? Well, men are like, for the men who are aware how much, birth control can suck for women, they're like, why would I want to sign up for that? Right. And they're like, that's going to shift my hormones and what's that going to do for me? Vasalgel has absolutely zero effect on hormones. Right. And we can say that with 100% certainty because it's basically it's like a temporary vasectomy, right? Mm-hmm. Vasectomies procedures been done on millions of men, right? We have a lot of data showing what happens with the vasectomy. So we can have a lot of confidence of what's going to happen there.
Yeah. And so just really quick on the use as a neuter for pets, or non-surgical neuter. Is that something that if someone wanted, they could just go to their local vet and say, I want Vasalgel, or was it only in with specific veterinary practices? Yeah,
it was released or it was done through these preclinical trials. Mm-hmm. Down the road, we are looking at releasing it for veterinarians to be able to do that.
Okay, so it's not widely out there for pets yet, but that could certainly be another application and maybe not other route for monetization too. So
truly, and we're exploring all of those options because again, we want to find what is everything that we can do to reduce the barriers to men participating in family planning. And so the more that we can find those avenues, such as, having it be available to veterinarians for animals, that helps to reduce the amount, the financial burden for men.
Got it. And so besides Vasalgel, are there any other forms of male birth control being developed that you're aware of and can speak on?
Yeah, for sure. So there are certainly other methods that are being developed and the goal here is if I'll say when I'm successful, it's not that when people talk about male birth control, it's only Vasalgel. We want an industry. We want a lot of options to exist.
Yeah, I think I looked online, and I think there is a similar. Well, I should ask if you have a competitor, because I heard there's something called Adam, which is being developed. I think the company's called Contraline.
Yeah.
And I believe it's a fairly similar thing. Maybe the polymer itself, it's a different formulation. So on that front, are there other competitors making something else? And then I know that there's hormonal male birth control that's also being developed. So anyways, I'll open it back up to you. But yeah, can you speak on your competitors and also hormonal male birth control?
It's a great question. We have no competitors.
Oh, really? Okay.
There are other people that are creating solutions to male birth control,
Mm-hmm.
and each of them fill a certain population's needs.
Mm-hmm.
And so Contraline, for example, it's a great product, right? You inject it, very similar, 10-minute pain-free procedure. The key difference is, whereas Vasalgel is reversible on demand, 10 days, 10 months, 10 years later, doesn't matter. With Adam, it disintegrates itself, right? And so it wears down. And so that enables you to say, hey, I want 1 year of protection. Right now, it's designed to last 1 year. So if you say, hey, I just had a kid, and I'm not marketing for them, but the way I imagine is hey, if you've had a kid, right, you just had a kid, you don't want another kid for another year, you could go get it, and you're protected for that length of time. And so it's a preset length of time. I think that when you look at it, the reason I say it's not competitive is the man who wants that is very different.
It's different, yeah. So I didn't even know that. So it lasts a year. Is that my understanding?
Yes.
And it automatically flushes out, or just the effectiveness starts to wane. Yep. Okay, wow. Okay, very interesting. So yeah, you don't really have someone that's quite, besides RISUG in India, but even that's slightly different. So, and then as far as hormonal birth control, what's going on there? Because I heard there's a study that was done, and I think men were kind of getting unjustly kind of lambasted. They're saying, oh, well, women, we've been dealing with all these side effects for so long, and now, because there were reports with this one specific, there's human trials, and they had to stop it because the side effects were so severe. So I don't know if it was tit for tat. Maybe it was just what the males were reporting was far more severe. I don't know. Could have been way more severe than what typically women are reporting with this. But and I think there's a few other hormonal male birth controls that are being developed. So can you speak a bit on that initial study that initial one that the study had to be ceased, and also just if you know anything about any other ongoing hormonal birth controls being developed for men?
For sure. So it makes really great clickbait to say men are wimps, right? They can't handle birth control. And then we take a step back and specifically let's talk about the trial that you're referring to, which was ceased. Now, the trial participants didn't ask for it to be ceased. The trial organizers and principal investigators didn't ask for it ceased. The regulatory bodies ceased it. You know why? Because someone died.
Oh, shit.
Right? And it's yeah, but guess what? With female birth control, people die too.
Yeah.
Right? It is a huge indicator that leads to depression, right? And suicide, right? You think of an airplane. You go down to an international airport and you think of everybody getting onto this giant airplane. Well, that many people women die every year because of female birth control, right? There's huge consequences to this. And yet, the reason that it was that trial was halted was because we recognize that we should not have to endure as a society, whether you're a man or a woman, the same level of consequences and side effects that come from traditional forms of birth control, right? So it's like, yeah, women have dealt with that and continue to deal with that, but does that mean that we should just accept that as a society? Now, when we think about like the what's interesting, what I think when we just call men wimps, we ignore the really nuance of this, which is from a regulatory perspective. When you introduce anything, whether it's a drug or a medical device, but let's focus on drugs. When you introduce it, the regulatory bodies are saying two things: how safe and how safe and how effective is this? Then it's a very simple formula of then what are the risks? Because you say, what's the risk of using it versus what is the risk of not using it? That creates the risk-benefit profile. And what people miss is that there is a very legitimate risk to a woman if she has an unintended pregnancy, which means that we have a much higher, there's a lot more tolerance there of what those risks are of using it, right? The side effects. For a man, the health consequences are relatively low. Right now, there's incredible social economic consequences to the man of having an unintended pregnancy. Yeah. And if you look at the unit, the man and the woman, right, they share that. But at the same time, like, should we just accept that for men? No, let's find ways to create something that's truly safe, simple, and effective. Not just say, this is the status quo, so we're just going to accept it. And so I think when we think about other options, right, there's broadly, there are medical devices that we just talked about, right? Vasalgel, Contraline being great examples. Then you have, on the pharmaceutical side, hormonal and non-hormonal. Now, hormonal are the ones that we're most familiar with because we're saying, hey, let's take what we've done with women and, and continue to push that forward. And there's a lot of great work that's being done there, showing like, hey, where can we reduce the risk profile, right, and maximize the benefit? That's great. Like, there are some men who are out there who say, I want to take a pill every day, or I want to apply gel to my shoulder blades, right? Or I want an hormonal injection, or I want to take a pill that's a non-hormonal pill. Like, great. Like, I want them to do that. And at the same time, let's recognize that there's a lot of men who say, I just want to set it and forget it device, right? That's safe, simple, and effective.
And that's where Vasalgel would come in. Speaking on other forms of birth control. So I had, in my investigation into potential male birth control options, one I found, which is quite fringe, is I'd read about a Swiss physician in the 1930s. I think Martha, I don't have it written down here, but Marte Vogel or something like that, doing some experiments where I think it was a he. Having men sit in hot baths daily over a period of several weeks, and it would basically heat up the temperature of the testicles. And doing that, I think it was a 6-week period. They'd do a daily bath. I think it was anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes. And then they'd test the sperm afterwards, and there was, I don't know if the sperm was dead or just whatever it is, but essentially they were rendered infertile. But it was reversible because if they stopped, I think the protection lasted something like 6 months or so. And they can continue doing the hot baths or whatever. And I believe they've since repeated this experiment a few different times. Apparently there's like a special type of briefs you can wear to heat up your goods, so to speak. So any thoughts? Have you heard of that? But any thoughts? Have you heard of the heat-based contraception? But any thoughts on heat-based contraception?
It's a great question. In fact, a few months ago, I was in Paris at the International Symposium of Male Contraceptive Methods, and it was really interesting. We're sitting there in this absolutely beautiful room from, I think, like at least the 1800s. It's
Versailles.
What was that?
Versailles? No, probably
No,
not there.
it was in the French National Academy of Medicine.
Nice.
Like the beautiful building, and parliamentary style seating where everybody has a little mic, and all of a sudden these protesters barge in, right, and take over the stage and start like demanding and saying like, that we collectively, the male birth control industry, which I say industry very loosely, it's a very small number of people, are whole, and mostly of academics, I should point out, but saying that we're holding up, what's been proven a safe and effective birth control option, which is thermal birth control.
Oh, wow.
Right? And it's like this very jarring, like, wow, like they feel very passionate about this. The reality is, there have been very limited studies done on this. Parsimus Foundation has actually done studies on this before Vasalgel. They were like, hey, if this works, great, right? They're very mission focused, right? Just like Next, right? Very mission focused of how do we bring about effective change. The reality is infertility is a relatively low bar to get to, right? And so a man being infertile means that if you are with a female partner and you're trying to have sex, right, then you're not, and you get right at the right time of, and you don't get her pregnant, which can often be related to just low sperm counts. And this is really what this does, is it reduces your sperm count to a technically infertile number. And I am a huge advocate. If you want to use thermal contraceptive options, do it by all means. God, knows that like you should do it, but recognize that it is not effective with any level of high certainty, right? It makes you technically infertile. Like if that were an option, I mean, we looked into this, right? We've looked into, many of you might have seen like on, Snapchat, there was like it went viral on YouTube of like a little bath that you put your testicles in, and it uses ultrasound to heat up the water.
Yeah, I think it's called, sorry, we got another motorcycle coming. I think it's called COSO.
Yeah.
COSO birth control. You can open it back up, Eric. Yeah, so, and I've heard ultrasound is potentially also another way that it can be done. But, so this is something that Parsimus already looked into.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and has done very rigorous studies on. And when you look at the actual studies, it is not something that I personally would recommend to somebody.
I see.
And on top of that, we don't know the health consequences of this. Like the briefs, the way that they work is they push your testicles back up into your body.
Exactly right.
And there's enough evidence to support that there could be significant health consequences of that, right? And some might say, well, people who are part of the transgender community have been doing that for a long time. And it's true. And at the same time, we've also seen some really, odd correlation to that and things like testicular cancer and other things that are, obviously very detrimental. And so when I look at it from, again, going back to what is the risk of doing it versus the risk of not doing it versus the other options that exist, I think it's a relatively naive to say, well, men can do this easily themselves, combined with the fact of like returning fertility is not guaranteed, right? If you do it long enough, there's evidence to suggest that maybe you can't return to fertility.
So like permanent damage from doing it too much.
Exactly.
Okay, wow.
And so it's like, but what's really interesting about COSO, you mentioned COSO, which I love, because COSO is not a product. Okay? This was a theoretical design created by a design student in Germany. Okay? And yet it blew up all over the world. Why did it blow up? What can we learn from this? Right? We've learned that men and women are desperately seeking solutions. And they are willing to say, look, there's a solution, when it was a conceptualization. Now, since then, the designer of it's like, wow, there's a lot of demand here. Let's see if we can actually make this. And I hope they are successful. Again, the more options, the better. But as of right now, all of the evidence suggests that it is a relatively ineffective with unknown safety profile.
because
it reduces it down
yeah.
to the level of infertility,
Right.
but you're still producing sperm.
Yeah, because I mean, it certainly would be fantastic if it was just they either built some sort of device that you put your goods in, or you took hot baths at certain temperatures or something. But because to me, that seems like a really non-invasive, supernatural way to do it. But from what you says, it doesn't sound like it's particularly effective, and so that's kind of unfortunate.
It reduces your chances of having pregnancy to a point of being labeled as infertile. But again, that's not saying that, but you're still producing sperm, a lot of sperm, right? You're still producing and ejaculating millions of sperm, millions. Okay. Assuming everything goes right, that's what it is. Now, on top of that, when we look at, again, like when we think about this notion of like, will women trust men, right? Like if a woman has to trust a man to take a testicle bath every day, right? Like I think you substantially play your, the odds aren't in your favor. That woman's like, but did you do it like yesterday? And like, have you been doing it every single day for the last 3 weeks in order to maximize the effectiveness of this? And then still yeah, there's some couples out there that works for. Great. I hope they do it.
Yeah, I think, I definitely think that the chance of a guy asks, oh, the temperature wasn't warm enough, or I forgot to do a day. It's similar to how it is sometimes with the pill. Sometimes they forget, or, whatever it is. So yeah, but that's kind of a bummer, because I was like, hey, that's really non-invasive. You can do it kind of anywhere, but anyways, yeah. And so there's this group of men wearing these funny briefs that just busted into this convention. And
did you see?
Was there a video of it?
No, but that's exactly, they were wearing the briefs.
Wait, they were actually wearing the briefs?
Yeah, with dildos. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I was like, wait, were you there? What's up?
Well, because I'm familiar with the briefs, and I heard that it was like kind of for some reason it was really, what's the word? Just, I heard it was a big thing in France.
Yeah.
There's like a company in France that makes these briefs. And so, kind of reminds me, well, I won't get into that, but okay. So heat-based contraceptives doesn't sound like that's going to be a great solution for men, but it also sounds like there really hasn't been super thorough studies on that.
There's been enough to show that best case scenario, this is like everything going perfectly, right? That it's not even worth looking. I'll put it this way. It's not even worth looking into the whole safety profile when you look at the fact that this means that you're still ejaculating millions of sperm.
Got it.
Best case scenario. Got
it. And just really quickly on that, just to wrap up on the heat-based contraception, if someone were to come out with some sort of device like the COSO, would that hypothetical device have to go through the same sort of approval process that Vasalgel would have to go through? It's not a pharmaceutical. It would be a device, right? So
yeah, it really not a lawyer.
Sure.
But it really comes down to medical claims. And so in essence, most likely yes. Now they might try to get around it. Like for example, like cosmetics, right? The reason cosmetics aren't as highly regulated is because they're really good at avoiding making medical claims. Technically, they might say like, "Hey, this is a testicle bath to make your testicles feel warmer," which would be an interesting marketing strategy.
A little loophole kind of.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's just a massager. It's I could see that. Also, I read about there's a Chinese herb, apparently. I don't know if you've heard of this one. Yep. That's just demonstrated some reversible contraceptive effects in both mice and apparently human men. Have you heard about that? Is there anything there you think? Or?
Yeah, it's a great question. So some of the problems with this, again, I want to emphasize, more solutions, the better, right? Part of the problems with I think you're referring to tryptonide.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So part of the problem with that is that it chemically is very, very similar to something that's very poisonous to humans. And so what researchers have been trying to do is, okay, let's analyze this, figure out exactly what part of this molecule is actually having this effect, and let's try to isolate that. There's been some really interesting work to do so. And I think it's something that I'm excited to follow along and also to help support, and if the time's right, to help carry it forward into market. But there's a lot of work that needs to be done to ensure that it doesn't have the health risks that it could have, while also recognizing that when we look at pharmaceuticals, it is like the body is a giant black box. And it's like, let's pop this in there and see what happens. Right. And so it becomes very, it takes a lot more work, and you still don't know until potentially years or decades later exactly the consequences, which is why we've chosen to focus to pioneer male birth control, to focus on medical devices. But we will have pharmaceutical products, that we have in the pipeline that will be coming out following that. But there's just so many inevitable unknowns with any pharmaceutical product.
Got it. And I just want to go back to Contraline here. And I think is their device called Contraline, or is it called Adam, right? Yeah. So are you guys, I suspect you guys are a bit further ahead than they are in development, right?
We're about at the same stage. So about at that final stage of going into clinical.
Okay.
Within the year-ish time.
Do you think you'll beat them to market?
Or do you not care? I mean, it's not a race.
Right.
Like, they are focusing on a really interesting population of men who need male birth control, and we're focusing on another group of men.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. And so, I mean, clinical trials aside, what likely options for male birth control do you think that we'll see come to fruition in the next several years? I know you said Vasalgel 2025. I suspect probably Contraline will have theirs out around then too. Do you know what the progress is on hormonal male birth control? Do you think that that'll be also coming about a similar time frame, or?
Yeah, so hormonal male birth control has gone through phase 2 clinical trials. They're going into phase 3 soon, which is looking at much larger populations, and saying, look, we know this is relatively safe. We know what the consequences are. Therefore, we can get. It's a lot easier to get informed consent to say, hey, how would you like to get male birth control, and here are the potential side effects and consequences of that. So, I think hormonal birth control will be really interesting to see how the market accepts it. I think that there's an incredible amount of value to it for men who say, look, like this is a relatively low cost to bear, but hormonal birth control, I think the key thing is it is shifting that burden within a partnership, and so for some men that will work and it's going to be great. But there is significantly more work that needs to be done, and there needs to be more investment in the space. And so right now, we are working with legislators on federal bills to help reinforce and support the male birth control space as just, again, going back to a fundamental human right. Right? Like this, we shouldn't have all these, need more like erectile dysfunction pills. Let's put that funding towards these products that will provide benefit to society as a whole. Right.
Yeah. I think I saw on your LinkedIn that you made a visit recently to the White House.
Yeah.
What was that about?
Yeah. So the White House is really looking at this administration is looking at how can we advance innovation and our competitive advantage as a country, right? Said another way, how do we decrease our dependence on other countries to do novel research, right? And so one of my one of the things that I get really excited about is regulation. And, there's all this notion of like regulation kills industry. No, like regulation exists for a reason, and we need regulation. What we exist in right now is a void, a vacuum of regulation, because there is no regulation that says, hey, if you want to make male birth control, this is how you make it, and this is what you have to show. That doesn't exist. That exists for if you want to like create a heart treatment or a cholesterol treatment or erectile dysfunction treatment device or pharmaceutical. There's a clear guidance on this is what you have to do, right? But instead, we exist in this world that's void of that, and it's what's often referred to as the rock problem, which is the federal government saying, "Oh, you want to do this? Great, bring me a rock." And you're like, well, what kind of rock do you want? Like, do you want it to be a big rock, a small rock?
Dwayne Johnson.
Right. Do you want me to bring you Dwayne Johnson?
Yeah.
Right. And you bring them, and you're like, okay, now we as industry and as academia are going to then spend millions of dollars to come up with what we think is the right criteria for a rock. And then we're going to make that rock, spending more tens of millions of dollars. And then we're going to bring that to the regulators. And we're going to say, is this the rock you wanted? And when you're void of regulation, they can just say, no, we don't like that rock. And then they say, bring me another rock. And you say, well, what do you want? They say, well, when you bring it, I'll tell you then I'll tell you if that works. And so what we are really advocating for is regulation, is to say, I don't care if I like it, as long as I know what I need to work with, right? What are those criteria? What's the guidance you're going to give us in order to produce something that you're going to accept? Simple as that. And if I don't like it, there are mechanisms to change it. But there's no mechanism other than Congress taking action to say we need male birth control. So FDA and other regulatory agencies figure out what you're going to ask for, what you're going to require there.
Super interesting.
Yeah.
Super interesting. And you've only gone to DC. Was it just one time, or have you made multiple trips to talk with the legislators? Or
yeah, so I mean, my that's my bread and butter. That's what I love, is working with all these agencies, bringing them together to collaborate, right? It's breaking those stovepipes that exist in DC and saying, like, we need to be talking together, and we need to create arenas and put literally everybody in a room. And this is something that in my previous companies, what we've done really successfully is let's bring together everybody, all the different stakeholders, so that you don't come up with a plan and then you have one government agency that's like, well, I don't like that. Literally put everybody in a room.
Nice. Let's do it. Let's get it. I want to ask, so I've heard stories of individuals self-experimenting with CRISPR. So if you were so inclined, as the CEO of the company developing Vasalgel, could you give yourself Vasalgel right now, today?
100%.
Okay.
Yes. And at the same time, just like literally millions of men who didn't have another option, right? I ended up having to get a vasectomy.
So you have a vasectomy?
I do.
Okay, wow.
And I had to get that because there were no other options. Nothing else that allowed me to control when and if I have a child. And having that burden on my female partner just didn't seem any way reasonable for me.
Right. Yeah.
And that's a huge price to pay, a huge cost.
Well, in that case, I suppose you'd have no need for Vasalgel just because, well, you have a vasectomy, so.
Oh, I'm still going to get it.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. For
solidarity.
Yeah, solidarity. Exactly.
Okay. Oh, that's super cool.
Yeah.
That's like you're kind of I would compare it to like you're a commander of an army. Like instead of being back, you're leading the charge.
100%.
That's super awesome.
And again, it's designed, and we've really optimized the procedure process to make it safe, to make it simple. Like this isn't a huge burden that a man has to undergo. This is go at your lunch break and set down your big burrito for a second, get it done, and your burrito's still warm when you go and pick it up and walk back to work.
Well, I think that's huge because, what better endorsement than the CEO of the company himself getting the procedure, even when he doesn't need to. You have a vasectomy, so that's really cool. That's really cool. What about other people though at the company? Could they get Vasalgel, or is it kind of, hey, you're at the top? So,
well,
because I know there's probably some stuff like there's like informed consent stuff. Like, I don't think you could just willy-nilly, if someone walked into some research place, even if they wanted it, I don't think you could just give it to them, right? So there's probably has to be some stuff in place before that. So, and that's just, that's such a vague scenario.
It's a great question. What I can tell you is, one, to all the regulators who I love out there that are listening, we're going to abide by all, federal policy. And at the same time, there are many men that are eagerly waiting, literally tens of thousands of men who've expressed to us, just to us, not even talking about all the studies, just to us, that have said, literally sign me up, put my name on the list. And so we are working literally day and night to find ways to be able to enable them to get it to participate in family planning, to choose when, if they have a child, as soon as possible. And some of those people are people at the company, right? We have people within the company who they're like, that's how I heard about this, is because I wanted it and I want to be a part of that solution. We have women within the company who are like, my partner wants this and I want to be a part of the solution. I want to be a part of creating the new world, what the world will look like when people can choose. Hey, do you want to have a child? No? Okay. Set you up for success.
Got it.
I can't emphasize that enough because that doesn't exist. Half of all pregnancies being unplanned. We can't emphasize that number enough. And so when we look at how many people it affects, again, a lot of our staff are equally affected just as much as anyone else.
So could I get Vasalgel today? Can you hook it up or? I'm teasing. No, I assume that there's certain regulatory things you couldn't just give it out. Really quick, because I forgot to ask this question before, just really quick. Is this something that insurance will cover?
Great question. So the insurance process is you have CPT codes, which is the code that's set for the physician to say, hey, insurance, we did this thing that and we have an agreement that when we do this thing, you pay us this amount of money. And so the beauty of this is that we don't necessarily need a brand new CPT code because it's essentially a vasectomy, right? It's essentially, now, massive difference in that it's reversible, but we are designing it so that people are able to, will ideally be able to get it through current CPT codes, as well as be able to then, and if there's any little differential there, be able to pay out of pocket to have it, again, being a massive different than a vasectomy. It's not just trying to be a vasectomy 2.0, but it is, there's a lot that we can leverage there, and to, again, make it available to as many people as possible, as quickly as possible. And then also, we have a strategy to develop our own CPT code that enables insurance to say, well, this is actually different and actually even better for insurance providers.
Got it. And so your company, Next Life Sciences, is it just working on Vasalgel? Is it working on other stuff? Was it working on stuff before Vasalgel?
Yeah, so Next Life Sciences, we are constantly and have an ongoing investigation into all forms of birth control options, with the criteria being safe, simple, and effective. And so, while I'm not in a position to speak towards those, what I can say is that Vasalgel is by far the closest to market and going to be the spearhead of changing what human consciousness around, wait, as a male, I can not have a child if I don't want to have one right now? Massive.
Nice.
And there'll be other men who say, hey, that doesn't work for me. I don't want a long-lasting reversible contraceptive. I want one for today and just today alone. There'll be options.
Got it. So for people who are watching, so where can people go to learn more about Vasalgel if they're curious, or if they want to
Yes.
sign up. Is there a sign up form on your website for if hey,
Absolutely.
I'm interested in being in the trials? Is there something like that?
So right now, the best form is go to the website, nextlifesciences.org.
We have the link in the description, by the way,
Easy.
guys. Yeah.
So you go there, sign up, let us know. You can put in just your email, or there's a little form where you can put in a little more information about yourself, so then we can ensure we provide the right information to you. But that will give you access to all of the exclusive secrets that we share with our community. And that's the best place to find out about all of the advances, as well as be able to participate in polls, right? Around like, hey, if there were these two options, or if this would make it cost a little bit more, but it provided this, what would you want? All that way to provide feedback. Sign up on the website, as well as follow us on LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, all of the places that you consume media.
You guys got TikTok?
We do have a TikTok.
Okay.
It's not me dancing. It's not me dancing.
Darn. I was
Yeah.
hoping. I was hoping. So I think we've super thoroughly talked about Vasalgel. We have gone a bit long. Time permitting, though, I want to know if it's cool if we did go a bit long.
Yeah.
If we can go into a few of your other things or other gigs. I want to talk a bit about the drone stuff. Not too long, but I think, maybe talk a little, maybe another 15, 20 minutes. Does that work for you?
Perfect. Yeah.
Sweet. So, I mean, there's a lot. So you were on Forbes 30 under 30. What was that for? Can you talk briefly about that?
Yeah, for sure. So when we look at like my timeline of the different things that I've been involved in, my sole focus and kind of my life mission, the reason that if you ask me, why don't I just kill myself right now? Right? Like, like, why do I exist? Right? It's
Don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that.
We need you.
Yeah.
We need Vasalgel.
Yes. Okay. After Vasalgel.
Okay. Oh, geez.
But no, like honestly, that's the question I ask myself. Like, why do I exist? What is each of our purpose in life? To me, for me personally, it's to maximize my impact. Well, how do I maximize my impact on the world? It is through unleashing potential, finding potential that is blocked, that has this massive hindrance, and unleashing that. And so going back, you mentioned Forbes 30 under 30. That was I received that incredible honor because of the work of both what I have done in companies, helping to change regulation and to create products that save lives and that are still today saving lives, as well as going back to when I was a teenager. I was, as mentioned earlier, was in the foster care system, and there was this incredible injustice that occurred where this loophole that existed for foster kids, and we go into it or not, but when I was actually still in the foster care system at 17, I went to a lawyer and I was like, hey, what would the law have to say in order to protect foster youth in this way and to enable them to increase the rights that siblings have? And so I said, what would that have to look like? And they provided me the information. I went to other lawyers, brought it all together, and then worked with nonprofits to introduce it into the legislature. And it unfortunately, by design, I knew it wasn't going to help me or my sibling. But it now, and what was really interesting is we had people saying you shouldn't do this because this is not going to help anybody. You were such a unique case. Literally within a month of the law coming into effect, immediately within a month, there was a sibling pair that were able to maintain a relationship, whereas otherwise it would have been prohibited.
And I don't know how much you want to go into that, but so you grew up in the foster care system. What happened there with the parents? Were you put up for adoption? Did one or both of them pass away? I don't know if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So if you want more details, you can check out my TED Talk, Google it online. But in essence, my biological mother was somebody who was just very unhealthy to be around and very abusive to me and to my siblings and to my to her mother. And when I say abusive, I mean physically, emotionally, and sexually abusive. And that went on for a while. And when I was an early teenager going into high school, and shortly thereafter, the abuse continued to escalate, and there was a lot of social workers coming in. There's a lot of drama, but what really finally was the crescendo, I guess, to put it in one way, is there was a particular night where she was extremely physically violent, and she ended up killing her mother, my grandma.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was an experience that, was,
And how young were you?
I think at that point I was around 15.
Okay, wow.
Yeah. I was the one who found her. Wow. It was, yeah.
By the way, if
we can go,
yeah.
I think it's important, because I think what's really important is for people to recognize, abuse comes in all forms. And even with people literally coming in our home, social workers coming in our home on monthly basis, investigating different claims, or because some of my siblings were disabled and they had social workers coming in, this abuse still was able to continue on for my entire younger childhood, with again intermittent situations within there. But then finally the final time I was removed and fully was able to be set free and realize the vastness of the world was when I was about 15. That's when I went into when I was put into group homes and other community type environments, and then into foster homes, and went around the system.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that those experiences have, I certainly imagine they've shaped your view on things. When it comes to Vasalgel, is there any factor there that's related, or?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I saw in countless of my peers is the fact that so many were products of unintended pregnancies, and that in some cases creates a lot of strain, economic and strain on a family, and there's just a lack of resources within family units, but also within communities to properly support families and youth, combined with the fact that the number one risk population of teenage pregnancy are foster youth, right? And to be able to help my peers to be able to be successful and not have risk that is massive. Again, it's the most foster youth are by far the most vulnerable, or at least one of the most vulnerable populations in our society. When we look at the fact, there's 150 million foster youth and orphans in the world.
That's wild.
That's wild.
That's crazy.
Look at UK, the entire population of UK, the entire population of Germany, smash them together, and there's still more orphans and foster youth than that.
That's wild.
And so, what can we do to help those groups of our society who are most vulnerable? What can we do to set them up for success? How can we unleash their potential? Well, one is, I believe, through providing safe, simple, and effective contraceptive options, being a huge, the number one indicator of success for a teenager is, do they have a baby? Do they accidentally have a baby? And there's many people who've had teenage pregnancies and they've gone, great, I'm happy for you. But at the same time, let's just look statistically, how do we set up society for success?
Got it. Well, Well, wow. That's sorry to hear that you went through some of that stuff, especially at such a young age.
But don't be sorry, because it's made me who I am. Like, I would not be sitting here today if it weren't for everything that's happened in my past. The good and the bad, the ugly,
of course.
Everything can be used for good if we choose for it to be used for good. And we have to make that active choice. But like, I think it's so key for people to recognize, like, our experiences. Like, yes, my experience was objectively kind of worse than someone else's, but also there's somebody else out there who's had objectively worse experience, and it's like this infinite fold of worse out there. It literally doesn't matter. What matters is what you do with it.
Yeah. No, that's actually that's a really positive way to look at it. So, talking a bit about your past, just really quick, educationally, you went to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. Did you graduate, or I think I read somewhere online that you dropped out? Is that right?
Yeah. So I've been a long time dropout. So like even in high school, because of all of the just upset to my education, and they said it was going to take so long to complete my to complete high school, I ended up dropping out. And
so you dropped out of high school.
Dropped out of high school, and then realized that in the beautiful state of California, you can just take a test that gives you the equivalency of high school.
The GED, yeah. Or is it something else?
Yeah, CHESP. So similar to like a GED, but in order to go to college, you still need to have a high school diploma. So I was like, well, how do you get that? And I went and found out you could actually start your own high school. And so started at high school that set, and then you have to set a pre-described set of requirements. And so we set it to just that it was that you pass the CHESP, right? And so then I was able to have a diploma and went to college.
So wait, you made your own high school?
Yeah. What
was the name? Did it have a name?
Yeah, New Aim Academy.
New Aim
Academy.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I did not know that. Can I? So I could start at high school.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Coming to you soon.
Now, where things get complicated is if you want funding for it, or if you want it recognized, broadly.
Yeah. Got it.
But it got me into college.
And while you were at SLO, Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, what were you studying there?
So I was studying sociology. Really interested in how do people relate to one another? How can we understand the experiences of others? And how do people relate to technology? So what I think is, something that I think is really important to emphasize is I've never taken a single business class. I've helped teach them now, but I never took a single one of them. And you don't need, there's all these false barriers that people put in their minds. My degree was in sociology. My degree in childhood was abuse. What both of those produced for me was empathy. Mm-hmm. And through empathy, you can relate to people, you can understand people. And I believe that is what's enabled me to figure out business, right? We don't have to put it on this pedestal. I've started and run and grown multiple successful companies, and we're doing it again through what I believe is what I've learned through life and through school of empathy.
Yeah. I mean, and I think if you look at a lot of highly successful entrepreneurs, businessmen, I mean, some of the most wealthy individuals dropped out of college. I mean, you look at Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg. So I don't think it's necessary at all. So
not at all. And what I want to emphasize is I didn't drop out because, I didn't want to do it. Mm-hmm. I want to emphasize the fact that I personally look at every decision I make and going back to, well, why don't I just kill myself? Don't right? But no, I like to emphasize why do we exist? Why do I personally exist? My answer is because I want to maximize my impact. So is my time maximally impactful being in college? For some time, yes. But beyond that, I realized I had one class left to go. Mm-hmm. And is the effort and the time and the resources it's going to take for me to do this one last class actually worth it to maximize my impact in the world? The answer is no.
Got it.
And that's true for me. It might not be true for someone else. Go to college if you want to go to college. Finish college if you want to finish college. Figure out what your reason why is. Why do you exist? What is your purpose in life?
And it doesn't really honestly matter what your purpose is. Like, there's no wrong reason to live and to enjoy the world. But know what it is, so then you can make thoughtful decisions so you're not just following along a pre-described path that supposedly at some point is going to end in, at the end of the rainbow with happiness, because it doesn't. Happiness comes from knowing what your purpose is and pursuing your purpose.
And I mean, a couple times throughout our conversation, and I don't know if you mean it in jest, but you've brought up, let's just for YouTube's sake, deleting yourself. I mean, are you serious about that? Like, once you achieve what you want to achieve with Vasalgel, and maybe you have other things you want to achieve, like, do you have a death wish, or like what's going on? What's going on there?
I don't have a death wish.
Okay.
To be clear, but I think it's really important to recognize, like, and this is just my opinion. This is life according to Fox.
Okay.
Right? Which life according to Fox, like, we find our most happiness when we have purpose.
Absolutely.
And if you avoid a purpose, then, like, I ask myself, like, literally, why am I here? And I have been incredibly I've been on the verge of I've attempted suicide. Right? Sorry for the, YouTube's going to hate us now. But like, I have been there and attempted. Luckily, it's to make a horrible joke, it's one of the good things that it's one of my few failures. To be a little dark
humor.
Yeah, dark humor.
A little dark humor.
But like, I've been there, and what saved my life was recognizing that I have a greater purpose. And like, even if your greater purpose is like exploring the world and like being happy, right? Or like going and like, trying at, all the different foods of all the cultures, or like, it literally doesn't matter. But you have to have a purpose to live, or else what's the point?
Definitely.
Life according to Fox.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's definitely, I read Viktor Frankl, Men's Search for Meaning. I mean, I think one of the biggest things is having purpose.
One of my favorite books.
Great book. So I think we're going to wrap up here really quick. We have 2 super chats from Stephen Krug. We'll do the super chats. By the way, guys, if you want to get in a quick last minute super chat, if you have a question for Fox here. So first one we have here, LR, mad respect for the challenges you've overcome. People love you for that. Every human can be valuable no matter their background. And but his next super chat, he challenges you a bit here, if that's good. Yeah. That's okay. So the fundamental issue with your pitch is vasectomies are already fully reversible, same cost and 100% efficacy. If you don't want kids, wear a condom, or more simply, don't put your peen in. Modifying biology is dangerous. So, I mean, Stephen Krug, I'm not just a few premises there as far as vasectomies being fully reversible. You know what? I'll just let you come in if you want to respond to this, but
for sure, Stephen Krug.
Krug, yeah.
Krug. I appreciate your super chat.
Just into the microphone.
Yeah. I appreciate your support and your comment there. I think what's important to recognize is, just by way of just to lay the foundation here, one is we work with some of the world's leading vasectomists and reversals, right? Some of the leading experts on reversals. And so I can tell you, even with their incredible amount of success of doing thousands of reversals, I think that the message that you have here is actually very harmful, because they are not fully reversible. A quick Google search can show you that, right? There's been countless studies showing that. They are not the same cost. There are no major insurance plans that cover vasectomy reversals. They cost about $10,000 out of pocket, which makes it incredibly prohibitive for many people. And that's why I really want to emphasize I think this message that you didn't come up with. This isn't unique to you, Stephen. There are many people that are saying this, and I think it's incredibly dangerous, because what it does is it sets people up to go get a vasectomy who might not have the means to be able to reverse it, and the efficacy is not 100%. Like, vasectomies fail all the time. Right? And you can look up those numbers as well. And in fact, as we shared earlier, in order to have near 100% efficacy, physicians are going to great lengths, such as removing whole sections of the vas, right? Or using multiple methods to constrict it, which then makes reversal near impossible, even if you have $10,000 and undergo this 3 hour long microsurgery that, care to point out, is only done by few experts in the world, right? So this isn't something you can go down to your normal doctor to get. So you have to take time off work. You have to have money to travel. You have to go set this up. Like the vasectomies are not the solution for people who might want a child in the future.
Okay, Stephen Krug. Well, thank you for the $20 super chat. And then he has one more here.
Yeah, please.
Not, I don't think, related to Vasalgel. All you have to do is make one other person happy in the world, and your life is worth it. You've already done that 1,000-fold. So, yeah, I think I don't think Stephen Krug is going to get Vasalgel, but I think he definitely respects that what you went through.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate your support, Stephen. I appreciate you voicing this, because it is so important. Like the comment you voiced is so important for us to help spread awareness around this, and spread awareness around the true cost of these, I think, problematic messages. Again, you didn't make that up, Stephen. I want to emphasize, like, there are a lot of people who say that, right? And like, when after Roe v. Wade, everyone's like, oh, everybody go get a vasectomy, like they're reversible. You're a bunch of wimps if you don't get it. It's like, there's a lot more going on than that.
Yeah. Yeah. And we talked about it before, there's risk of chronic pain. And, we got another one from Stephen Krug. Good response to the challenge. So, yeah, I think, Stephen Krug is just certainly curious about this. And, hey, Stephen, thank you for the super chat. Good to see you again. Stephen's been a long-time viewer. He's always in the chat. So we really quickly will just pull up a non-super chat question. We kind of went over this, but if you want to just, like, really quickly lay this out.
Super simple. There are no known side effects, no known notable side effects, and the risks are relatively low. All of our studies show that after proper implantation, there's very little complications that can occur. Right? It's a relatively straightforward process. Now, it's brand new to our line of thinking, but again, this same method has been used in heart stents very successfully, which is obviously a lot more risky of a process. And we're working with known pieces of science that we're bringing together to create a truly revolutionary solution for the world.
Sweet, thank you. And this is also another longtime viewer. He's always in the chat. So 5X DM, thank you for the chat, man. Good to see you.
Did you just count all those X's real quick?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure it's 5 X's instead of saying X. Very last thing I want to chat to you about is so your WhiteFox. It's WhiteFox Defense Technologies, right? So can you talk a bit about that? So you do drone threat mitigation, and so you've created a device that can detect when a drone enters into a certain area, and does it go and attack the drone? Does it neutralize it? Or just tell me a bit about the company and what it makes.
For sure. So going back to, again, how do we unleash potential? When my company before WhiteFox was a company that was designing and manufacturing high performance drones.
High performance what?
Drones.
Oh, drones. Okay,
yeah.
Got it.
And so we made this technology, and we're like, this is going to be amazing. Like nonprofits, humanitarian aid, all these wonderful people are going to be able to get access to this technology because it's very accessible and affordable. The problem was that we got a lot of demand from them, but also we had people like, hey, what happens if you attached a kilo to it? And then you flew it, and then it dropped the kilo. Like, could it right itself? Like, and we started to realize, like, drones have incredible potential for good, but they can also be used for a great amount of maliciousness and recklessness. And so in order to truly unleash the potential of drones, my thesis had to change, which is it's not about making drones cheaper or better or easier to fly. It's about creating trust around drones to enable people to know when a drone is in the sky. Like right now, we have this beautiful window right here, right? If all of a sudden we looked up and we saw like, wait a second, there's a drone that's hovering there, right? How would you feel?
If there's a drone just right outside
Yeah.
this window, I'd be, what's going on? It's probably noisy. You're interrupting our interview.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, it's a nuisance, right? And it's like, what's it doing there? And is it like doing something? Is it
Spying.
spying on me? Like, what
Yeah.
is it trying to see here? And so, like, these are things that I think really show, like, people have a general lack of trust for drones. I would feel that way, and I'm one of the world's biggest advocate of drone technology. And so it's like, okay, how do we solve that? Well, you need to trust them. You need transparency and accountability. Transparency, you need to know when they are, who's operating them, why they're there, is it malicious, what's it doing? And then also accountability. What can you do about it? And that's where the system that we created tracks the drones that are flying. So this is used at nuclear power plants. It's protecting world leaders. It's protecting celebrities. It's protecting, it's protecting military installations. It's protecting, like, you name airports, international airports.
Oh, I think the other one I saw, I think I looked on the website, is one of the applications is for prisons or jails, because people will use drones to fly in contraband. And so you would be able to neutralize, right, drones coming into secured areas.
Yes, 100%. I'm glad you mentioned prisons, because, like, when we talk about democratization of technology, drones have democratized drone delivery.
Yes.
So I'll tell you, like, when we look at, like, prisons, the prisons that we protect have daily flights of drones, daily deliveries of goods. And we're not just talking about the typical what started with drugs, weapons, and pornography, but now we're seeing things like Rogaine.
In prison, Rogaine.
Yes, Rogaine. Chinese
shit.
food.
What? Wow.
Still fresh, hot Chinese food.
That's wild.
Yes. But what it shows is, like, it is so wild. And what it shows is that people are able to, like, the access to airspace has been so democratized that you have literally these criminal organizations that are able to deliver Chinese food. You can't even order Chinese food from a drone. And why is that? Because regulation doesn't exist to create that. And so that's really where we had a pioneer in that company to work in DC to create an entire new industry, which is the counter drone industry. And so WhiteFox Defense is by far the most, we're referred to as the most pro-drone, counter-drone industry. And this is just one of many examples where we are unleashing potential, whether in this technology and recognizing, like, what do we actually need to do here to unleash the potential of technology? What do we need to unleash the potential of humanity? In foster, we talked about foster youth. We have both Vasalgel, which I think is going to have a massive direct impact on foster youth. We also have a nonprofit set up that's working directly with foster youth themselves.
Mm-hmm.
This is about looking at how can we create holistic change in the world.
Got it. And so with the WhiteFox, let's say you're a prison warden. There's drones coming in. Maybe the guys in the towers can see it, but maybe it's overnight and there's not. So what specifically is going on? Do you send up like a counter drone to attack the enemy drone? Like what's going on there?
For sure. So when a drone mitigation occurs, the system will, in essence, will take control of the drone, lock out the original pilot, and then reroute the drone to a safe location, whether that's back to the original pilot or safely landing it in place or reroute it to a pre-designated location.
And how does it take it over? Is it through, because I imagine it's radio, some sort of frequency or something like that, or?
Precisely. Yeah, so WhiteFox has really pioneered the field of asynchronous blind signal analysis. So being able to see a single signal emitting from a drone, then using that to replicate and create the controller signal to the drone without ever seeing the controller signal, mind you, which is extremely difficult. In fact, $35 million worth of difficult to create.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it took a lot to create that. And that is what...
Sorry, apparently we're getting some reports that the audio they're not getting audio.
I think we're good. I
Is this
Or is
better?
this guy, I don't know. Can we get one in the chat if you guys are getting audio? There's one guy who's saying he might just be trolling, but guys, one in the chat if you hear us. Eric, are we?
They're saying they can hear.
Oh, okay. So this guy's just trolling. Okay, sorry about that.
Great.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So what the system will do is then take. So the way that it works is being able to safely remove the drone from airspace. That's the key.
Got
Yeah,
it.
and so there's a lot of other approaches, like let's go send up a drone, like you mentioned, and go capture it with a net, or take out all the communications in the area, though, or blast it down with a laser. Like there's a time and place for every method. Again, that's why I said we don't really have competition in that company either, right? Like if you want multiple layers, then great. Like just like with a condom, if you want a condom, use a condom. Great. If you want a ballistic missile, attached to the system just in case, great. We literally have that. We don't make the ballistic missiles though.
Got it. And so would you say that the WhiteFox is the leader in this?
Yes.
Okay.
In safely and securely integrating drones into society, 100%.
Got it.
It's the
interesting.
only scalable method for drone detection, identification, and mitigation.
Gotcha.
Which enables you to have things like drone delivery, right? Because then you say, I look outside the window and I know the drone is there because it's supposed to be there. And if it's not supposed to be there, I know something can be done about it. Right now, that doesn't exist in general society, right?
Yeah.
In general common sense.
Yeah. And so I don't know if you can talk about pricing on this. I mean, I assume it's, large organizations that are probably interested in this. It's probably not available for just someone in their backyard.
It's more than a
it could
vasectomy.
be.
It's more than a vasectomy.
Yeah. Is it like, let's say like a Santa Barbara County jail? Maybe they have it already. I don't know. But, there's a bunch of heroin flying in, let's just say weapons, etc. They want some drone threat mitigation. How much does it cost?
What I can tell you is every company I've had is always designed around the same premise, which is how do we unleash potential, which means creating a scalable, sustainable company. Scalable meaning it's accessible, as many people who need it can get it, and sustainable meaning we're not selling it for $1.
Sure.
Right.
Okay.
And so I can say that it is quite literally military grade technology.
Wow.
That is made at commercial, that's provided at commercial pricing.
Wow.
Yeah, and something I'm very proud of, because there are people who sell inferior systems for literally many times the cost. And our goal is not like, we're not trying to like bottom out the market.
Right.
We're not, but like, let's charge a price that's fair and reasonable and allows, for example, the county jail to not have drugs and weapons being smuggled in. Like, let's not make this barrier to entry so difficult. Let's look at how we reduce the barrier to entry rather than increase it, like unfortunately many companies do.
Super cool. Well, I mean, it sounds like you mentioned it was like $35 million cost to bring this to market and develop it. So, I mean, hopefully you've offset some of that, with revenue. But anyways, well, I wanted to open it up to you if you had any final thoughts here before we wrap up, or if you think we pretty much hit everything that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I think a couple things I really want to emphasize is if anybody has any way that they want to help support any of these initiatives, like please reach out, connect with me on LinkedIn, LR Fox. That's where I'm by far most active. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Feel free to go to our website, sign up, add a message, reach out. We love hearing from our supporters. And one thing that I'll take a moment to emphasize or to share is our newest nonprofit, the Next Foundation, which is looking at from a big macro view. We're solving like the ability for people to control when and if they have a child. And empower them to do so. We're also looking through the foundation at how do we help children who were brought into this world without the proper resources. And so we're creating an academy for gifted orphans and foster youth who really want to share their their gifts with the world, and so that's something that we're building out. But if any of the listeners, are particularly their heart or minds are drawn to any of these causes, please feel free to reach out. Love to hear from you, and if you're doing something similar, we'd love to find ways to collaborate and help support.
It's awesome. Well, LR-Fox, thank you so much for your time, for coming on. Really appreciate it. So if you want to learn more about Vasalgel, you can visit nextlifesciences.org. The link is in the description. I want to thank you guys for tuning in, and we will see you next time. Thank you guys.